This is the Walpole Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight is Wednesday, September 6th. It is 7 p.m. The first order of business, Judy Conroy has a statement she'd like to read.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This statement is my response to what I deem to be a harassment by the emails sent by Mr. Petrosi to various zoning board members and town administration in regard to my ability to sit on any hearing presented by Mr. Petrosi to try to pressure me to step down. Mr. Petrosi filed suit against my husband and myself as abutters to his Burns Ave project. Mr. Petrosi filed this suit against us, and we did not initiate it. On the advice from our attorney, we had to countersue in order to protect ourselves. I am 100% covered and within my rights to sit on any hearing Mr. Petrosi presents. As per my conversation with ethics, the advice they gave me on October 13th, 2021, I filed a disclosure form with the town clerk, and the Board of Selectmen also have a copy. I stated this fact at the time. I did not participate in any vote on Mr. Petrosi's hearings before my filing. My reason for speaking out now is to declare this is a form of harassment of a public figure, as Mr. Petrosi is quite familiar with how state ethics works. And this knowledge led to these harassment emails behind the scenes, hoping to pressure the town to get me to step down. I was not copied on these emails, which were all about me, nor did Mr. Petrosi call this out during his last hearing before the zoning board. I have first-hand knowledge of Mr. Petrosi's familiarity with the ethics process, as he filed a complaint with the State Ethics Commission against my husband, Jack, on his duties with the planning board. My husband was found to have no conflict, and Jack also has filed the same type of disclosure with the town clerk. Given these filings by my husband and myself, it is evident we are allowed to participate in all Mr. Petrosi's hearings, and this is Mr. Petrosi's last-ditch effort to harass me behind the scenes. I have been in town government for over 35 years as a town meeting member, school committee, and board of selectmen. Recently, I was elected to the Walpole Housing Authority, appointed to associate member, and promoted to full member of this zoning board. I'm also on the 300th anniversary committee. With each office I have held, I have sworn to uphold my duties in the best interest of the town by upholding all laws and bylaws, and I will continue to perform my official duties objectively and fairly. And lastly, I will not cave to a bully. Thank you.
Okay. So the first case we have tonight is case number 2211, Wall Street Development Corporation for Pinnacle Drive. Mr. Petrosi.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We submitted a letter to request a continuance. We're in the process of revising plans based on neighborhood conversations and meetings. And we've asked for a 60-day continuance. And we've also requested the extension for the board to make its close the hearing comparable 60 days as well.
Okay. Lauren, do you know what we're looking at for a time? That would put us out to what? Continuance until when?
We were thinking November 1st would be the closest to 60 days.
Okay. And continuance of time? No.
In Mr. Petrosi's letter, it was February 23rd.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was closest to the 60 days.
Okay. So at the request of the applicant, could I have a motion to continue case number 22-11 for Pinnacle Drive until November 1st, 2023, and give an extension of time at the request of the applicant until February 23rd, 2024?
So moved.
Moved by Judy.
Second.
Second by Mark. Any further discussion on this? Voting on this will be the regular members and Tim. And this is just to continue and extension of time. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried.
Hey, thank you.
Okay, so if you were here for Pinnacle, that's been continued until November 1st. Next, we have case number 2210, also Wall Street Development Corporation, with respect to property located at Darwin Lane for a comprehensive permit pursuant under Mass General Laws 40B. This is for 28 home ownership, non-age restricted condominium townhouses in 6 buildings on approximately 3.44 acres. Okay, so we've had some recent submittals on this, and we do have our peer reviewer, Mr. Sean Reardon from Tetra Tech. Good to see you this evening, Mr. Reardon. So we will start with Mr. Petrozzi, the applicant.
So since we last met, it did take a little bit longer for us to revise the plans and have our stormwater management report put together and reviewed. So we just, as you said, just recently submitted plans last week with the stormwater report all completed. In the interim period, we did revise the plans to accommodate, as you'll see with Mr. Gloss's plans, that we did eliminate the hammerhead turnaround that the fire chief had objected to. We did add additional visitor parking. We did add stormwater infiltration and an area town engineer regarding our proposed sewer pump station that will be on the site. And John will fill you in on all the details. So it hasn't been lost time, but hopefully it'll be productive time that we've put in to get the peer reviewer less work to do, hopefully.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll turn it over to your engineer,
Yes.
Mr. Glasser. And of course, Mr. Reardon, you haven't seen any of these revised yet. And as he said, he just submitted it. And we will open it up to public comments after we hear from the applicant's engineer with the revised plan, peer review, and then I understand that I'm expecting there's a number of people that have comments on this.
Not sure, Mr. Chairman, the ideal place to put the plans, but someone will let me know. But I'm just going to start with, and this shouldn't take too long, but the site plan, and as Mr. Petrozzi mentioned, there's a few things on this site plan that you may or may not have seen, I'm not sure. But we added a area at the end of Darwin Road for the common mailbox and a few parking spaces so people who live there can drive, park, get their mail, and then drive down to their condo unit. And as Mr. Petrozzi said, we added some visitor parking to the plan. I think that's pretty easy to see that. We also added no parking areas, so we don't want cars, right, parking around the cul-de-sacs, blocking potential emergency access. So we've added that to the plan, where there will be no parking signs, and there will also be no parking painted on the pavement. And then we also added, especially for this area here, because the cul-de-sac actually sort of doesn't, it's not like a cul-de-sac you'd see at the end of a subdivision road, because there's so many driveways coming off of it. So we're saying that we want a painted white line around there to identify the actual limits of the cul-de-sac and where cars cannot park. So you're going to be parking in your driveway, the visitor parking, and no other area on the lot for parking. And so that's pretty much the changes to the site plan. I'm just going to go quickly then to the stormwater.
Yeah, we have a question on the
Okay.
lot plan.
It looks like the visitor parking that you're showing is within the right-of-way of the cul-de-sac layout. Is that correct?
Well, there's no real right-of-way, but you're saying within the 82 feet?
Yeah.
Well, it's another 20 feet to the back of these spaces.
I'm talking about the one in the end of the roadway, the entrance to the site as opposed to the exit.
These
Yeah.
are within the public way, yes. So these isn't visitor parking, this is just simply park, get your mail, and drive into the site. So obviously, subject to, you know, your approval if you think that's, you know, a good idea or not. But if they're not going to park in a parking space, they're going to park parallel along the curbing. So we just thought that that was a better idea, to give the owners a place to park. So, for the stormwater, again, sorry for the delay, but it doesn't really show completely here, but as I said at an earlier meeting, this was a subdivision that was built in the 80s or the 90s, wasn't necessarily designed in accordance with how we would design it today, but still was designed very well. But we wanted to make sure that, A, we identified the watershed area to the basin, and that we knew, you know, how much rooftop and how much wooded area and how much grass going to that basin. And then we need to and then we need to model that, have the storms go through that, and find out what effect that may or may not have on the development below. Because, you know, I'm sure you've seen these things on the news and, you know, water rushing across people's properties, and that's what we're trying to avoid. And at the same time, though, we also sort of realized that there's a whole, and this was all part of this thing with John Chessie about saying, where does this water actually go? So we found out that it actually goes this way, to the, kind of to the northwest, when it potentially would overflow this basin. And so then the whole question came out, well, where does that go, and what's that? And then we actually realized that there's a bit of a watershed above this, off-site, that's also heading in this direction. So we included that. You're not going to see it on this plan, but it's on the pre- and post-watershed plans that are attached with the stormwater report. So that's why I say we wanted to make sure that we knew exactly where every drop of water is coming from and where it's going to end up. So what we did find out is this basin actually will contain a 100-year storm. The 100-year storm to get there is going to get there through these catch basins. So we feel that we don't really necessarily, I mean, we model it in our proposed condition, but we don't feel that this is something that's going to overflow and come onto our property. We did include the rest of the watershed here, and as was shown on the plan before, we're going to capture that water here, and we're actually going to put it through our infiltration system, which is all the way along the proposed driveway, access roadway at this point. So we have catch basins along this access road, two storm scepters, water quality inlets for water quality purposes, discharging into an infiltration basin here. That basin will not, no stormwater will flow out of that basin until a 100-year storm. So everything up to a 100-year storm stays in that basin. But there is some flow across other areas, not paved areas, but grassed areas. And that flow is captured in a infiltration trench that will be built along the top of the slope there. The trench is actually down in the ground, in the existing ground. This is all filled here. And so between the infiltration basin and the infiltration trench, we meet the Massachusetts stormwater standards for no increase in rate of runoff for the 2 and the 10-year storm, but we actually, no increase in the rate of runoff for the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm, because those are the 4 storms we look at. As far as water quality, so, we have a form essentially that we use from the Mass DEP. So we have sweeping, we have deep sump catch basins, storm scepter units, and then the infiltration. So between those, we meet the stormwater management regulations. So, which is 80% TSS removal. That's how we meet those requirements. I know you asked me about the wells. I asked the draftsman about putting the wells on the plan. There is a well, obviously, that's 400 feet from here and here. So he never really did get them on the plan. I do have them from the Mass GIS. I mean, this is pretty easy. Anybody can get these. So you can see, I'll show it to you, but you're not going to see it here. But there's sort of 3 wells. I mean, one of them's 400 feet away. The other ones might be 1,000 or 1,200 feet away. We're actually, so again, this pipe that discharges here only discharges in a 100-year storm. All of the water up till then is going to go into the ground. And we've actually placed it so that it is not flowing towards the nearest well, which is the well that's essentially 400 feet from this radius right here. And the reason for that radius was the town needed to own that property. So we're actually, the stormwater in a 100-year storm, which is when this will flow out of here, will not be heading towards that well. It'll be heading towards wetlands that are upstream of that well and upstream of the other wells. Because the watershed kind of splits into 2 watersheds below this area. So that is the information, the data that we provided in written form with my sort of quick synopsis there. I can either answer any questions or I'm just going to quickly go on to sewer. I'll go on to,
I do have a question on, what percent impervious coverage is this site as in your proposal?
have to,
Is it on, because I've got the plan right here.
it should be on the cover sheet. There should be a zoning chart.
6%,
46? Okay,
46.6.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any question? Mr. Reardon, do you have a question or comment?
Just one quick clarification. You mentioned that there's no discharge up to the 100-year storm.
From the pipe. It's
Right.
discharged across overland, yeah.
Are you sure of that, or are you just saying there's no discharge during the 25-year storm event? Because there's quite a big interval between a 25-year storm and a 100-year storm. You didn't analyze, say, a 99-year storm and determine that there's no discharge, right?
No.
So, just minor difference, right? He's saying it's up to the 100-year storm, when the analysis only analyzes the 25-year storm and the 100-year storm. So a discharge happens somewhere along that spectrum. He just said it's up to the 100-year. I doubt that's the case. It just means that there's no discharge during the 20, or there's no discharge during the 25-year. There's a discharge at the 100-year.
Could be at the 50-year too, if you calculate it for it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So just, not that it's.
Could be at the 26-year.
It could
Right.
be, but then.
Highly unlikely.
It's very, very.
Yeah, I didn't really mean, I understand what you're saying. I didn't mean it that way. Maybe I said it that way, but I didn't mean it that way. Again, I did tell them that we only modeled the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year storm. We're only required to model the 2 and the 10-year storm under the stormwater management regulations, right? Unless we're showing that there's going to be downstream, an increase in the rate of runoff. So we're not really, we're meeting the regulation, that's my point. But point well taken.
So-
Maybe I misspoke, right? So,
But also, you're meeting the, I totally get it, you're meeting the stormwater regulation in a general area, meaning that's would be the requirement for a development right out here in the center of town.
that's right.
But-
That would be the requirement for the town of Walpole to meet also.
Right.
Any non-residential, any residential development that's more than 4 units
Right.
is supposed to meet it, yes.
But what I'm now thinking is, this isn't just a regular site, you're within 400 feet of a drinking water well.
That's, that requirement is in the stormwater management regulations. And basically, it says, no discharge, no pipe, right, no discharge directly into the zone 1, I think they call it, the 400-foot
400
radius
foot.
around the
Okay.
well. Yeah.
And there's also elevated requirements for water quality treatment when you're in those kind of zones.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Just one clarification for me as well. You mentioned that the infiltration systems that you have designed would handle the 100-year storm. Would that be, that's a combination of the water that's falling on the site as well as the upstream stuff that's coming in that you're also putting into the infiltration basin, if I understand correctly?
So it's going to handle the first inch of runoff, which is what the water quality volume is. It's going to handle the first inch of runoff.
From both the upstream
From,
pipe and the
yes,
site
from
itself?
every, you're right, from all of the watershed that goes through the catch basins and the storm scepters.
Okay.
Right, so there's certain things that we don't have to treat, the runoff from the rooftops and the runoff from the grassed areas. All of our runoff from our rooftops, though, does go into the either the infiltration basin or the infiltration trench.
Thanks.
So another, not saying it was necessarily an issue of concern, but another area that I think has not maybe been fully explained to the board is how we're going to discharge the sewer from the units at the site. So as everyone knows, I think by now, this site is well below Darwin Lane. So what we're going to do is through a series of sewer manholes is bring all of the sewage to a pump station here, and then there's actually 2 force mains, and I will explain that in a second, that are going to pump up to a manhole here, which is going to be built over the existing lateral that was left for this site. That's a 6-inch pipe. So I recommended to Mr. Petrosi that he contact F.R. Mahoney, who are suppliers of pump stations. And they do other things. And they have extensive experience with sewer pump stations, with sewer treatment plants, and other appurtenances that deal with sewer. So their design was to have what's called an Environment 1, right? It's a prepackaged sewer pump station that comes in a fiberglass tank that is placed in the ground, wired for power, and then connected to a force main. So they spec'd a pump station with 2 grinder pumps. And the reason I like to recommend Environment One, FR Mahoney, is because these pump stations are designed to maximize the grinding ability of the sewer, of the pump, of the sewage pump. Whereas another way to do it is to simply buy like a Barnes grinder pump and get a, concrete wet well that's essentially a square or a rectangle, put that down in the ground, put the pumps down at the bottom, wire them, and off they go. So what I've found over the years is, that's certainly a reasonable way to do it. But unless you can kind of shape the bottom of that wet well, the solids don't always want to get into the cutters, right? Because when, it's like a propeller, this thing turns on, and the immediate action is that it pushes the sewage away from the grinder pump, and then it comes towards the grinder pump, right? It's a little bit like a propeller when it starts up. So Environment One, which is, I think they're in either Troy or Albany, New York. They're, not far away. We don't have to get these from China or anywhere else. They've been doing this for years. I've spec'd, and there are many Environment One grinder pumps in Walpole and other towns that we've spec'd. We've never really had anybody have an issue with them. We've never really had anybody have a complaint. So we sort of heard from the engineering and the DPW that, what happens when, so there's two things we look at, right? What happens when there's no electricity? So this will have a generator, because there's going to be gas here, so we'll have a gas-fired generator that will generate the electricity to run it when the power goes off. And then what happens when one of the pumps goes down? Well, there's two pumps, so that's usually not a concern. These things have switches and alarms, so when one of the pumps goes off, someone's going to know about it. It's usually not a concern, but it seemed to be enough of a concern that we went back to FR Mahoney, and they put in sort of a dedicated backup pump. So this system now is actually going to have 3 pumps. And that's why it has 2 force mains. So the pumps that would normally, or would the more normal way that this comes, they turn on and off and pump up through a common force main, one force main. The other one is going to be a dedicated pump, so for some reason, if those 2 pumps fail, there's a 3rd pump. It's going to be wired on its own circuit, so to speak, and it's going to have its own force main. The reason it has its own force main is, well, if those pumps are failing, perhaps if we're using the same force main, maybe the sewage is just going to go right back into the pump station. I don't know if you know what I'm saying, but pumps have sort of a check valve so it can't go back. So if that's what happened to it, the check valve's broke. Oh, well, you turn on the other pump and it's all tied into one force main. Potentially it's just going to go back right into the wet well, right? So there's a separate pump in here that's dedicated for a backup. And that's how we've came up with the design. So, and that's why when you look at the plan, there's 2 separate force mains. They both just run up and they're going to tie into that manhole right there. And then the other thing that probably wasn't sort of spelled out, and that is the water main. So maybe I talked about this, but we're going to take the water main, bring it here, it's going to split left and right. And usually what the water department wants to see is we have the hydrant on the end, right? So it's not teed off of the main, it's actually the main's going to end with the hydrant. Reason that's important was when you flush the main, then there's no dead spot. There's nothing after that hydrant where, dirty water can kind of hide. So That's how we laid out the water system. So those basically were my sort of charges here. The things I was asked to do was for the layout, for the access roadways, the stormwater, the sewage, which again, we, sort of had F.R. Mahoney help us with the design there, and then the water system. So, other than that, Mr. Chairman, I think I can answer any questions you might have. I understand that these were just, I think we got them in on Thursday with Monday as a holiday and Friday probably every half day for everybody or whatever, so certainly understand that.
So I have a couple questions. The force main coming out of the pump station, is that a 2-inch? It shows up here as a 2-inch line coming out?
It's
Is
a
that correct?
2-inch pipe, yeah. So
Two
there's two 2-inch.
Two-inch.
Yeah, they're generally Schedule 40, so they're what they call Class 150 pressure pipe,
Yep.
so.
And that'll go up to the cul-de-sac at Darwin, at which point is it gravity flow from there?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So one of the things, I know the town engineer had some questions and had some concerns about this design. I don't know if, I know the town engineer had some concerns about the design. So the question I have for you is, if you're tying into the town system, who's going to be responsible for this? Is this going to be a homeowners association, or who's going to be responsible for this system?
Yeah, this belongs to the people who live in this community.
Okay.
They take care of it. That would, right. They would replace the pump should they need to be replaced, clean any lines should they need to be cleaned. After the pump station, it's really just water. It's, a slurry, but that's why I say we like Environment One, because their slurry is really very close to water. The solids are ground up very fine. So,
Anybody else? Judy?
Mr. Glosser, I had asked for the well locations, and I'll take whatever you have.
I'm going to give you this.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay,
Okay.
if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, yeah.
I can, the draftsman was kind of reluctant, but we can make a separate plan. We can add it to the plan. So that it's going to be, as you can see, it's going to be, at a scale of, I don't know, 1 inch equals 1,000 or something like that. But there's 3 wells that are, probably within 1,500 or 1,800 feet of this site.
Okay. And also, under the Zone 2 well protection, and someone else already mentioned, it's 15% impervious. Can you explain how you can request or project for the project 46.6, which is almost 3 times what is allowed?
So it's 15% if you don't get a special permit from the zoning board, which allows you to go to whatever the underlying zoning allows. And the requirement is that the stormwater system at the site meet the Massachusetts DEP stormwater management regulation. And I believe that's on the plan, on the zoning chart at the bottom. It cites the section of the zoning where that's found.
Okay. And also, in the design of everything for stormwater management, do you have any kind of positive information that you can guarantee that no pollutants will get into the town drinking water?
Well, I'm an engineer, so I'm not a scientist, but we are going to provide a report from, I think it's called Geoscience, who will give you a report that will explain how that will work.
And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I guess this is for us. Do we have comments from Sewer and Water on any of this?
No.
Can I request that we ask them again?
We've solicited, yeah,
Okay,
comments.
all set.
You said that the rest of the properties on Darwin are all gravity fed into that sewer line?
Into the sewer, yes.
Now, you're proposing a system that could be up to 150 PSI?
No,
Or it's just rated?
no, the pipe, right, it's rated. I'm talking about the pipe. So the pipe has to be robust enough, right, solid enough, with enough strength that should for some reason this system reach 150 PSI, the pipe won't burst.
Right.
We would expect, and FR Mahoney can give us the information, or I can give it to you. We usually, a system like this might reach like 30 or 40 PSI in the pipe. It doesn't go very high.
What's the standard PSI for a natural gravity system?
No, we don't worry about that, because the PSI, because you're putting pressure right inside the pipe, so you don't want the pipe to burst. So a gravity system, the water's flowing by gravity, so that water doesn't really have the ability to burst the inside of the pipe. So for a gravity system, we're looking at pipe that's strong enough to handle the load over it, right? So if you have a shallow pipe with a truckload going over, trucks going over it, you might want to use a heavy-duty pipe. You might even want to change from PVC to ductile iron or something like that. So for gravity systems, the sort of the exploding part of it is not part of a design.
I guess the water and sewer can comment, but I guess my question more specifically is that you're taking an infrastructure that's built off of gravity, and you are now injecting sewerage
Right.
with
And-
pressure. What sort of reassurance, and I doubt there may be, but the people know that they're not going to be having backflow into their properties?
Because, this is not, this pump doesn't, it couldn't fill this 8-inch pipe up with
Right.
sewage, right? It just, it's not a very fast pumping pump, and it's a low-pressure pump. So, and actually, and I know you're going to laugh at me, this actually provides a little bit of benefit to this sewer, because this is a dead-end sewer, and typically on a dead-end sewer, you don't have enough flow, especially these last few houses, to push all of the solids along, and sometimes these systems end up backing up, and, they have to come out and clean them out. Well, here you're going to get every day an automatic, like garden hose, pushing that sewage that's in that pipe along and down through the system. So, but a concern that this is going to overwhelm this 8-inch pipe, it really is not a concern. This 8-inch pipe could probably carry something like, I'm going to guess, like 500,000 gallons a day or something. It depends on the slope, but an 8-inch pipe can carry a lot of sewage.
And Mr. Reardon
Yeah.
will review all this, too.
But that was all I had, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Reardon?
One quick question, just want to make sure I understand. So your discharge from the force main goes to a project-owned section of gravity line before it discharges to the public sewer?
No, it goes to the public sewer.
So it-
Darwin Lane is a public street.
So traditionally, pressure connections to the public sewer are not allowed. Usually you need a gravity break as part of your project first. Is there a way to incorporate that?
Yeah, we're pumping up into a manhole that's going to go into the system.
But the manhole is a public manhole or a private
It's a
manhole?
public manhole.
So that's the issue. Traditionally, and I think Walpole's the same way, they're not going to allow gravity pump connections. And so really all it means is you just got to put a new manhole in on your site.
Yeah.
transition to gravity, so that any transition that Mr. Delaney speaks about happens, the transition from pump to gravity happens on your site rather than in the pump system.
If that's what the town wants to require, then that's what we'll do.
It's typical, so if you want to petition otherwise, I'm sure you can do that.
You know, yeah, I'm not going to argue with it. That's what the town wants to do. If that's what they say, then that's what we'll do.
So when you have your peer review, that's the kind of comment that you add in, and then, Mr. Galasso, you could design that. I totally understand what you're saying as far as the pressure break.
Yeah, and it's not a real
No.
complicated or
No.
heavy lift. It's
No,
just sort of a-
it stays on, theirs is theirs, the town's is the town's.
And the town just wants to deal with gravity.
Right.
Towns don't like dealing with pressure systems. They're wrong.
So there's no question whose it is. Okay. Okay. Anybody else have questions for Mr. Galasso? Okay. Good. Do you have anything else, John?
No, that was it, unless you want me to bore you more.
No, we've talked about quite a bit. This was the goal for tonight. We also have, I'm sure some neighbors might have some questions or some comments on this, so we'll turn it over to neighbors and abutters. So, okay. Yes? Why don't you, yeah, come on up. Thank you.
I do have some slides to complement the letter that I submitted. Again, for introduction, Scott Horsley, I'm a hydrologist. I've been retained by Hill Law, who I believe has also submitted some correspondence on the project. Hill Law is representing some abutters to the project. And I do have some, is that going to work out, Patrick, you think? Okay. I do have a letter, which I'd like to just kind of walk through, but I think the slides will help us. So maybe while the first slide is coming, I'll just introduce
I
myself.
don't have this, when was this letter submitted?
August 30th.
August 3rd. Let me see if
I think you do have copies.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I've got it right here. Hill Law. Yeah, I got it.
That's the one, should be the last, right?
Scott Horsley. Yep. Thank you. Okay.
So just by way of introduction, I do have more than 30 years' experience. Most of my work has been for the federal government under federal contract with the U.S. EPA. I've also worked for about 20 different states, including the Mass DEP, all of the New England states as a consultant. I've worked for many municipalities, a number of nonprofits, et cetera. I also teach at both Harvard and Tufts adjunct faculty, the course that I teach there, which I start tomorrow. And that's called Water Resources Management. It's a graduate level course, cross-reference between the Civil Engineering Department and the Environmental Policy Program. And it covers hydrology as well as land use regulations and methods to restore water quality. I also just mentioned that I have served on many Mass DEP advisory committees, and the most relevant one for tonight's discussion would be the Mass Stormwater Advisory Committee. I actually helped to draft the stormwater standards that were already referenced once tonight, and I suspect they'll be referenced a few times. So you can go to the next slide, Patrick, thank you. And I just want to start to make sure we're all on the same page, because I want to talk about the location of this project relative to the drinking water supply, which has already come up in a couple of the questions. The project is located in a Zone 2 wellhead protection area. This is actually a slide we prepared for EPA that we use nationally to train state governments on how to protect groundwater. And I think it's important to at least get the concept here. A wellhead protection or a Zone 2 area is defined as that area which contributes water to the drinking water well. Any land uses within that zone of contribution or wellhead protection area, as it's shown here up on the top, within the MAP Zone 2 area, have the potential to alter the water quality going to that well. In fact, the water quality in public drinking water supplies is required to be tested regularly under the Safe Drinking Water Act. Pollutants that are found in the water supply are essentially a sum of the land uses within the watershed. So both on the federal level and the state level, there's guidance as well as regulations that require minimum protection of these systems. Next slide. So this project is located, I should be just be transparent here and tell you that I'm colorblind, so if I mention of color, double check me on it. But I think people can identify the project parcel here sort of in the middle of the slide. There are 4 public supply wells, there's 6 public supply wells shown on the bottom left side of the slide. I think their blue circles represent the 400-foot radius, which is a Zone 1, and under state regulations, that's essentially a no-touch zone. Really don't even encourage hiking there. It's sort of don't go there situation, and that's because of its, primarily because of the fast transport times. If there's a spill, it can get to the well very quickly. The lighter shaded blue area is the Zone 2 area, or the wellhead protection, and Walpole has a groundwater overlay district, which shows that area. So you can see this parcel is clearly well within the Zone 2 and right up against the Zone 1. So the proximity is pretty key here. And let me go to the next slide. This is a map of superficial geology, and this matches up with some of the soil descriptions that are provided in the recent soil report that I've just gotten a quick look at, and when it was submitted. I think it's dated August 28th. The soils underneath the site are coarse sand and gravel, which means they're highly permeable, meaning water flows through them quickly and contaminants move through them quickly with little attenuation. So these soils, on top of the proximity of this project to the well, the soil types are about as vulnerable as you can get in Massachusetts geology. These coarse sand and gravels are, again, very high permeability. So that, in my view, raises kind of the stakes of being extra careful with this project site. Next slide. Now, I apologize for the words here. I got a couple slides where I just wanted to present some of the actual text that I provided in the letter because I want to explain it. So the town of Walpole has adopted a local health regulation. And in that regulation, I've highlighted it, and I'll just read it here because I'm not sure everybody in the back can see the slides. Land uses that result in impervious cover of more than 15% or 2,500 square feet, it says feet, of any lot, whichever is greater, are prohibited, unless a system of artificial recharge of precipitation is provided, and I've underlined these words, which I think are key, that will not result in the degradation of groundwater quality. Now, the term degradation is not defined in the regulations, but if you look it up in 5 or 6 dictionaries, I think you'll say it makes it worse. That's essentially what they're after here. The proposed project, the number that I got out of the materials were submitted, the question was asked earlier, 45%, so it's about 3 times the density of the 15% requirement. Again, the regulation does say or imply that you could go beyond 15% if you can demonstrate there is no degradation. I'll pause there. That's a pretty high standard, and it should be a high standard, right next to a drinking water supply. I'll also mention here, because the Mass DEP standards were mentioned, and those are the standards that I helped work on in the advisory committee. Those standards were designed to apply for wetlands protection. The jurisdiction initially was only wetlands protection. The other term that I heard the engineer use tonight was 80% TSS. TSS stands for total suspended solids. Those are particulates. That's like material that gets washed off from the sand or from parking lots. That's not the contaminants that I would be concerned about with drinking water supply. I'm not concerned about getting sand or sediments into the water supply. I'm concerned about chemicals. It's a different standard. So I'm not sure that the Mass DEP standards are the right ones to apply here. I think this is the standard that's the right one to apply here, and they're different. This one's more restrictive. This is your regulation. I also want to say that these regulations and that wording is required under state law, that water suppliers and towns adopt that language or something like it. The Massachusetts drinking water standards require that towns adopt language like this. Different regulation than the Mass DEP stormwater standards. Two different standards. This one's more restrictive, and I believe this is the one that we should focus on here, especially where we're 3 times the density of impervious surfaces, we're very close to the well, and we have very coarse sediments. Next slide, please, Patrick. Okay, this one's going to be tough. I'm not going to read all this. Alphabet soup, as we call it, with chemicals. What I wanted to do is point out here that this is not theory in terms of threats. There have been plenty of documentation of the types of contaminants that get into groundwater from stormwater infiltration. Stormwater infiltration comes from parking lots, which collect hydraulic fluids, oils, combustion products from automobiles. I always tell my students, in fact, just go to your local coffee shop that's fast turnover, look at the parking spaces. They have oil staining in almost every parking space. When it rains, that material is transported. In this case, it's going to be infiltrated into the groundwater. The treatment that will be provided is the solids, the total suspended solids. These chemicals, and I won't read all of them, but I'll highlight a couple of them that you've probably heard of. Toluene, trichloroethane, there's phenols here. The one that I don't have on this slide but is in my letter is one that I know you've heard of called PFAS. It's a big problem. We're finding it in stormwater. We're finding it in lots of sources. It comes from construction materials, asphalt shingles, automotive sources, etc. And the key here is, how do we protect our drinking water supplies, which is really the subject of my course, and that is reduce setbacks as far as you can away from the drinking water supply. Those uses that you have to put, or you feel you want to put within the zone 2, low density. This one, your regulation says 15%, maybe go higher if you can prove there's no degradation. I don't know how they're going to prove that, but looking forward to those submittals and reviewing those. No degradation. That's what your regulation says. That's what the state law says too. Do I have one more slide, or is that it? Okay, so let me just sum up with a couple of other comments here. Yeah, I think I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to. There's a little bit more in my letter. So if you've had a chance to read it and you'd like to ask a question now, I'm happy to answer it. Or in the future, certainly if there's an opportunity to come back and talk further, I'd be happy to do that. But I do think there's some serious concerns here. I guess I would just reiterate that I know this is a 40B. The lawyers that I work with, Dan Hill and Dennis Murphy, are state experts on 40B law. One of the myths out there that I've learned from them is 40Bs don't have to comply with local regulations. That's not what 40B says. 40B says the applicant can apply for a waiver from local regulations if you decide weighing affordable housing versus public health. And that's a tough one. I'm a big supporter of affordable housing. I've worked on affordable housing projects, working on 2 right now, actually, for them. But I'm also a big supporter of drinking water quality. I think there are the right places to put high-density projects, and there are wrong places to put high-density projects. So I think this one is certainly one that deserves a lot of attention. And I just sum up and say that the compliance with 80% total suspended solids removal, which is the state, we heard it tonight, I'm not sure that is adequate to meet your standard. The previous slide, the no degradation of drinking water quality. So happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you for that very detailed explanation. Board members, any questions?
Just a general question. I know you mentioned that this would be very difficult to do, but I mean, how would one go about determining whether or not a project will not degrade the water? I mean, in other words, I guess that's on the applicant to explain to us, but in your experience, how would one go about even evaluating that?
To doing the evaluation?
Yeah.
Well, I think they need to go far beyond the stormwater standards, total suspended solids, and look at the types of pollutants that we are finding in stormwater that have been documented. And then if they can design a treatment system to remove those, then maybe there's some potential. But it's not going to be, in my way of thinking, if the goal is affordable housing, adding that kind of cost is going to make it tough to make it affordable. And I suspect there's going to be an attempt to compromise that. But if you want, there are ways to treat it, but it would be very expensive at this location, I think.
Thank you.
Question?
Yeah.
This is for Scott or applicant's engineer. Do you know what the withdrawal rate is for the well that the projects within the zone 1
I don't know it offhand, Sean.
Do you know that? You don't know that?
varies.
She said that what's relevant about if the well only is used for 1,000 gallons per day versus 100,000 gallons per day. You know, obviously the well that draws more draws from a larger area, so it's probably relevant information that we can probably go online and find it, or we'll ask the applicant to provide it.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I agree with what Sean's saying. And as the well pumps more, it actually draws down the water table, and it increases the slope of groundwater table, and that increases the speed, and therefore the retention time, or what we call the travel time, is going to be substantially less. So I agree 100%. I don't know what the pumping rates are, but I'm guessing they're pretty significant, such that there's an appreciable drawdown and a pretty fast. I think I said in my letter that I would anticipate less than 200 days travel time.
You just mentioned, the Kona depression, right? That's
Yeah, cone of depression.
So
yes.
with the Kona depression, how far can a cone of depression spread from a well in this type of sandy gravel soil?
It's directly related, as Sean is implying, to the pumping rates. So depending on how far you pump it, I mean, easily hundreds of feet, thousands of feet in some cases, but certainly hundreds of feet.
Okay.
And also, it depends on where you cut off the cone of depression. Sometimes there's a de minimis, a tenth of a foot is used sometimes, but that could easily be 1,000 feet or more.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Yep.
Good. Is there anybody else that would like to comment? Mr. Hamilton, if you want to comment. Does somebody mind taking this down? Thanks. Thank you, John.
Yes. Hamilton, Precinct 5. The drawdown for the School Meadow Brooks, which are millions of gallons a day, is 5,280 feet. And I started out with Dr. Mott at University of Amherst, and he referred me to the Audubon Society, who referred me to IEP, who did our Water Resource Protection Overlay District, along with Gregory McGregor. And back then, we calculated the zoning for the town of Walpole, and back then, we were able to draw 3 million gallons from School Meadow Brook, 1 million gallons from Mine Brook, 4 million gallons a day, and we couldn't justify all the buildable lots we had, even in the rural sections, because we were going to run out of water. And eventually we did, and we had a building moratorium because of that. To get around that, we built those gigantic tanks and filled them with water, but even they sometimes get a little low. So we don't have an infinite water supply, we have a finite water supply. And these 40Bs got to start taking that into consideration. We need to have them calculate, because IEP did it way back. It's a mathematical challenge to take all the buildable lots, calculate the people that would be in them, and calculate how much water they're going to use and how much water we can draw. We need to do that. And the other thing, the other complaint that I have, and I talked to Patrick about this, when I was on Conservation and then I was on the Select Board, there were a lot of buildings that were built that were low income then, now, and these low income apartments or houses became market value after 20 years. Now, I saw a letter from the Preserve to the town of Walpole.
Mr. Hamilton, would you stay on the topic for Darwin?
Well, no,
We're talking tonight about engineering and water, so I don't want to start talking about other developments and any covenants or any affordability time lapse or anything like that. That's really not applicable. I value your comments, so can you get to the points that we're talking about?
Yes,
tonight?
I would like to work with Patrick to find out how close we are to that 10% that we need, because it appears we're never going to get to it because these affordable units become market value. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yes, sir.
Sorry, it takes me a little bit longer.
You've got time.
Good evening. This is this is Paul Parlon, and I live at 22 Eleanor Road. And the pumping station is about 25 yards from my house. 2 weeks ago, the sewer department was up at my house, and they spent 3 weeks up there. They dug up the street to replace the piping that was up there that the so-called gentleman was talking about, and nothing ever happens. I also just want to tell you, I have a little bit of knowledge. I worked for the Boston Housing Authority for 37 years as an electrician. I went in many mornings to see that the cellars had 3 feet of sewerage in them, broken pipes. That were never going to happen, you know. City of Boston put the best in, but they thought it was. Now, if this happens, and people in Walpole have to cough out some money to pay for whatever this gentleman just said, well, I think that's a crying shame. We put you people up here in our normal voting, and we expect you to do your best, which you're doing. I just want you to know that each and every person that's out here that I've talked to is 100% against this place. Do not want to take a chance. Maybe if these people were to put up maybe $5 million as a holder in case anything ever happened, so we don't have to put out 50 cents. That's our money, we worked for it. That's all I want to say. I just wanted to let you know that I back up to where they want to put this. I like the trees that are out there and all the animals that I see out there. I don't want this guy out there or his building. Thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, Bernadette Moriarty, 28 Darwin Lane. One, sewage pumps, slurry pumps, whatever, don't mix with drinking water. Two, one of the plans that he was just showing, he had 3 parking spots, or 4, I don't know how many he had. Is that up in the circle, in the public land, in the public circle?
That's actually a good question. I saw that. Mr. Glossa, do you want to comment on
Half the
that?
circle seems to be gone with, yeah.
But are
So
you
you're
putting-
parking spots in a
Hold
public
on.
space?
Everything goes through the board.
Oh, sorry.
Those parkings,
So,
the
Mr.
guest park.
Chairman, they're just for the people to park while they pick up their mail. They're not a permanent park.
Right, so, yeah, those parking spots on the existing cul-de-sac.
For people to park and pick up their mail at the common mail.
Okay, and so, I saw the same thing, and the applicant really has no right to be taking town property for parking.
That it should be used for pickup spots or drop-off spots, or
Right.
whatever he wants to call it.
And we're aware of that. I saw that. I thought that was unusual.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your observation, too.
Hi there. Brian Canavan from 1288 Washington Street. A procedural question. Does the fire department, engineer, et cetera, have a chance to submit a new letter based on the plan we saw tonight as opposed to the original plan?
Not at this point. They haven't responded back.
Correct, but do they have the opportunity?
Oh, yeah, they absolutely,
Okay,
yeah.
great, thank
This
you.
public hearing's open. It's going to be open for a while, and we will have
Okay.
detailed comments, yes.
Visitor parking was also my concern. The actual dedicated spots that they put at the end of the roundabout now, where the hammerhead used to be. I think there were 4 or 5 that I saw. So one point is, I can't believe that small number of visitor parking spaces would accommodate the number of visitors in that dense of a development. But the second part is, where that's located is at the top, the southwest corner of the plot, which was, if I remember the diagram correctly, exactly where the closest point is to the Zone 1 or boundary. So, may not happen, but car fire or fires happen there, the fire department comes, and is zapping that with water, that water is going right down towards the well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? Comments from the public? Any other engineering? We have the peer review, we have the applicant's engineer here tonight. So, okay. And as we said, because we've just had these updated plans, we're going to have time to review them. Sean, you'll get a copy of the updated plans and continue your peer review. Do you have anything you wanted to add tonight?
Not right now, no. Everything all my comments will be put in a letter, so everybody sees them and can know they get resolved in one way.
Okay. Okay. Do you have anything else, Mr. Glasso?
No, I, always welcome a peer review, because if anything can be found out that, we need to improve upon, that's what we want to do. So I think that it's a great thing that towns hire peer reviewers, obviously very competent people to review our submission.
I do have a question for Mr. Horsley. Do you mind? Yeah, come on back up, if you don't mind. Over the years, we've seen a lot of 40Bs, and this board understands more than any other board that, local zoning is not what's at issue. You understand that, this board understands that. Do you know of any cases where there's been a similar situation with a 40B development this close to a wellhead or a town drinking water supply, where the zoning board put conditions or actually denied it and it withstood appeal?
I don't know of a 40B that's been even proposed as close to a well. I've not seen this before. And I also haven't seen one that has had conditions added to it.
Okay. So this is unusual to have something this, in your experience, you haven't seen ones this close to, wellheads?
I have not.
Okay. Thank you.
It's very rare to have any development, regardless of what it be within a zone.
It's not within, just to clarify, it's not within a Zone 1, right? Zone 1's
A portion of your site is within the zone.
It is? No, it's not. Yeah, but, and I understand, okay, but even the GIS, excuse me for 1 second. I'm not arguing with you.
Yeah, and I'm just I was just going off of the.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with you. Back in the early 1980s, the town of Walpole realized that part of this piece of property here was within 400 feet of that well. So, and this is actually land-courted land. So the town hired a land surveyor, John Anderson. He drew the plan, and the town, I don't think they needed to take it. It was a conveyance. But I did notice that when you look at the GIS, they don't show that. And this is, you can see radius equals 400. So that's the 400 feet around the well. So,
Okay. But I think this is really going to the point of Mr. Horsley, that this area, whether it's 400 feet or 450 feet or 350 feet, this is an area of high permeability and water water flow towards the wellhead.
Mr. Chairman, I was just trying to give your peer reviewer, a factual thing about ownership. Okay, that's all. It had nothing to do, I'm not a scientist, all right? So
you're an engineer.
Mr. Horsley's comments are Mr. Horsley's comments. I cannot rebut his comments because I don't rise to that level, all right? So.
You do, but on an
No, I don't
engineering
rise
side.
to his level as far as science and things like that. So I can look at the stuff as far as stormwater management regulations and this and that. That's where sort of ends for me. Mr. Petrosi's actually has, at my request, actually has hired a company, Geoscience. They are the ones who will work with Mr. Horsley to work this out, not myself.
Okay.
I'll work with the engineer for the things that, I need to improve upon if that's what happens with this peer review, okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Can I speak to this gentleman before you leave? Can I speak to him?
No. In the public hearing? No, you speak to everything goes to the chair.
Okay. Okay.
Do you have a comment?
I spoke about, is it okay if I speak?
Yeah, you don't have to, you can, yes, we can hear you.
I spoke to you about up at the pumping station up in Walpole. Like I said, 3 weeks ago, the Department of Public Works was up there replacing pipes. They were there for 3 weeks, the pipes were so bad. They probably replaced about 50 feet of pipe, and that was the sewage. The only reason that they found out about that, the red light went on, I called them, told them, the red light was on, that was a thing that somebody on the street, God help anybody that sees it, feels like calling them, they can call them. Since my house is right beside it, I try to keep track of it. That didn't go off, and then the pipes that they put in, I would think the town of Walpole put in some damn good pipes. Now, these people are gonna put in a super duper pipes that were in the Boston Housing Authority where they have about 40 years or less. And they rotted out into the basement to the point where you had, like I said, maybe knee deep of sewage. And that was because the pipes all rotted out. I don't know about this gentleman's here, about his pipes. It must be something that we just got from NASA or something like that, I don't know. Again, I just want to let you know that I'm the one that live right across where you're going to build this. Don't want you.
Okay. So, we need to continue this here, unless, are there any other comments, any questions?
I guess there's one request, I guess, that one of the key relevant facts is the pumping rate for the wells in the area, and I would just request either through Patrick or the DPW or Water and Sewer, whoever we can get that information so that our peer reviewer has it and can be shared with everybody.
Connect them with Sean too, so.
Yeah.
So we'd like to continue, I don't know, what, 30 days or?
What's our next available?
So we have, in October, we have town meeting on October 16th, and I know Ms. Fitzgerald is not going to be here on October 4th. So Lauren and I were discussing probably if the board is available October 11th as a possibility to meet in October, just because town meeting kind of interrupts the middle of the month, and just looking to accommodate Bob as well, so.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Does that work for you?
The 11th works for me.
Does the 11th work for other board members?
I believe it's a Wednesday.
It is. Yep, it's Wednesday. I just want to make sure that other people can do it. Mr. Radin, will you be able to attend and also have your comments by then?
I will have my comments by then. Looks like I'm clear for now. Yep.
Okay. Okay, so at the request of the applicant, could I have a motion to continue this until October 11th, 7 o'clock here at Town Hall?
So moved.
Moved by Drew,
Second?
second by Bob. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Could I just add that, could we get sewer and water comments by that meeting?
We can request,
Yeah, so we did have comments for the original submission, but we haven't got any comments on the new submission yet. So we'll ask all boards and committees at the same time, just because.
I just want to, I mean,
Yeah.
if Mr. Reardon's going to be done, I don't think we should have to wait for sewer and water to comment on comments. Like to see all the comments coming in at the same time.
Yep.
Lean on them. Thank you.
okay, so all those in favor of continuing until the 11th, 7 o'clock here at Town Hall, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried.
Great, thank you.
Okay, good night. Okay, we're not done, we still have another hearing. So next we have Summer Street.
Be talking to you soon on others.
Mr. Chair, would you want a brief recess, or are you fine?
Do people want a break? Good.
Okay.
Okay. This still is the Walpole Zoning Board of Appeals, and we now have case number 23-26 relative to previous decision 0320 for 55 SS LLC, which is the 51, 53, 55 Summer Street. This is a modification request from the applicant for a previously approved comprehensive permit per Mass General Laws 40B. And I believe Mark just stepped down. Okay. So, very good. Mr. Hale, good afternoon, or good evening.
Thank you.
Somebody mind, can you shut the door?
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Okay. How are you, Mr. Hale?
I'm well, how are you?
Good.
Appreciate your time. Since we were
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, since the last hearing, I think Town Council circulated a decision. I assume that you've seen the decision, and that it represents what is acceptable to the board. In addition, you challenged us to make the project more part of the community. And as you can see, we have extended the trail as was requested on the western part of the site to the emergency access. That area will also be, we'll spread wildflower seeds there to beautify it while the trees regrow. And you also challenged us to be creative in coming up with a way to benefit the community. And since the last hearing, Town Council, through my attorney, Mr. Levine, who's here, requested or suggested a donation of $100,000 to be earmarked for the South Walpole Pool. Just before that, and not unbeknownst to me and not related to me, there was a petition started to create a quiet zone in South Walpole. So our response to Town Council was that we're willing to make a donation that supported the community, but that we would like it to be earmarked only for the creation of a quiet zone. And to show good faith, we instead of $100,000, made it $125,000. We've responded to peer review comments, and I think we've addressed all those comments. So beyond that, I don't have a lot to say. I think this is pretty simple and straightforward.
Okay.
Do you have any questions, or?
Yeah, I just have some questions, and I looked at, there's been a couple letters submitted by abutters. Garvin, is Garvin here? Garvin? And also Burden submitted letters. How are you? Yeah. And one of the things you talked about is things that I raised at the last meeting that, and many other people did, had to do with the previously approved development was with a home ownership component with the single-family homes, the duplexes, and you know, one of the things that I look at is the neighbors didn't appeal that decision because it seems like maybe that was for whatever reason, that was one part that I was happy with, and now that's been changed. So the question is, what can we do to make it so that this is a part of the community that they all value and they all seem to want? I understand that you've added the walking trails, which that's a step in the right direction, as we could say. But what else can be done to make it so that this makes the neighbors of South Walpole that didn't appeal the decision, you know, happy with this new modification?
This is our proposal. So we've presented a modification that your peer review agreed will lower the traffic count, has less impervious, uses less water and sewer resources, and it's our proposal. We've offered to make a donation, which is totally unrelated to our project. Neither the pool that was requested, the pool donation, or the donation toward a quiet zone have anything to do with our project or the modifications. And frankly, don't really belong here. But since the request was made through Town Council, it seems like it's reasonable to respond, and we've made a reasonable response. We're proposing that it's an all-rental project. During the hearings, I don't think anyone supported either part of the project, frankly. I think that's a kind of a fiction. And, you know, we thought that the people who live here would like a quiet zone, and $125,000 would pay for the consultant, engineers, whatever, so that the select board could decide whether they want to go forward or not. And it would give the people in the neighborhood an opportunity to not have the train horn blast 25 times a day. That, I think, is a major benefit. I personally live about 125 feet from the tracks. The Fitchburg line goes by 25 times a day, in and out, occasional freight train. I'm 300 feet from one crossing in one direction, 1,000 feet. I hear a train blast once a month. There's a quiet zone. And it doesn't bother me. I'm in a modern building with good insulation, good windows, and I can barely hear it. That's not true for people in the neighborhood who may be living in a house that was 100 years old or 50 years old. So you asked us to be creative and to make a proposal that would benefit the community. There's a petition that's been started that I didn't know about, but it gave an idea of doing this. I think it's a good proposal.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know what else to say.
So that was my comment. Any other comments from the board at this point? Okay. Are there some neighbors who want to comment on this or have anything to say?
Hi, my name is Erica Burden. I'm an RTM of Precinct 5, and I also live in South Walpole. I'm an abutter to the property. I honestly don't have a lot to say tonight, but I'm here to request that this change is denied. Mostly for the reasons that a decision was made already. So this hearing took about 2 to 3 years already. We put a lot of time and effort into this. I know the zoning board did as well. A decision was made the first time around for 236 units at 4 stories, which South Walpole was okay with. We accepted that. It was done, it was finalized, it was the best case scenario we felt for us. Then a decision was remade a short time later to move up to 268 units at 5 stories, which is something that, to be quite frank, we honestly weren't okay with. We had a decision and then it was changed, but even that decision, we accepted it, we moved on, it was done, it was final. So now we're here a third time after, months and months and months. And I think, to be honest, we're just done. The decision was made, it was made 2 times. We don't want it to be changed again. The request to change this should be, no, sorry, decision is final. You have to do it this way. I don't even want to argue rental versus ownership. It doesn't matter. We're all done. I don't even know why it's being entertained, to be honest, with all of the time and effort that was put into it the first time around. And I have to say, regarding the quiet zone, a lot of people at this point don't want a quiet zone. A petition was sent out, and as of today, I think only 100 people signed it. And we had a lot more sign that at the beginning of this whole thing. We were trying to have it downsized. So that's not something I think we should accept money for, when the police have to approve something like that. And the last I heard, they don't want a quiet zone in South Walpole. So it's something that hasn't even really been discussed yet. And I think for, the developer to say that giving money for the quiet zone has nothing to do with this project, I mean, in essence, it really does. At one point, they were saying that this development would be geared toward or it would have, it would be geared towards seniors, people that wanted to downsize and that maybe were retired, but who is going to want to live there if there's a train running through their yard? So it's in their best interest if they have the quiet zone. I think a lot of people at that apartment complex or living there in general aren't going to like the train horn blowing back and forth either. So it does, it is in their best interest to have a quiet zone. But I don't know if that's even going to be possible to be passed, and I think $125,000 just might not be enough. Like, I don't know where that number was thrown from, but I'm guessing it's going to be a lot more than that to do all of the things that might need to be fixed in South Walpole, whether it's fixing the intersection or to handle all the traffic that's going to be coming in, or making a quiet zone. I think it's going to cost a lot more than that. So I honestly don't know why this idea would be entertained, and I'm hoping the zoning board will just deny it. And if it's appealed, I don't think we're any worse off. We're at the same position we were before. So it's not like we're losing money on this, really. So the decision was final before, and I just think it should be stuck with. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes. Joanne, how are you?
I'm going to speak a little bit for Kathy Garvin, who couldn't be here. She just sent me her. Oh, bear with me for 1 sec. I think Kathy's point she was really trying to get at is what we've heard over and over again, that the project's changed. It's changed completely to everyone in South Walpole. We thought we were going to have something that would really mesh in with the community. Now it's all apartments clustered together. I don't think anyone really wanted that. We were happy, at least a little bit, with the townhouses and the townhomes and the whole ownership question. And what Kathy's trying to say, I guess, is that she, in her past and people she knows, people who live downtown in Walpole, their rent's going up constantly, every 6 months, every year. And this is why they feel like it's just not going to be a place where people are going to stay and become part of the community. And I think that, we've gone through everything in this project, as we all know. So sewer, water, soil. But being part of the community is really a huge aspect for South Walpole. This is a gigantic complex for smaller South Walpole. And I think I agree with Kathy 1,000% that it's just, people just don't get invested in the community as much. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe she's wrong, but we all know once you own a place, you are definitely much more invested in the town, in the schools, in the services we all receive, the roads, and everything about the town. So I urge you to say no to this change. And I believe that really everybody, I think Erica's right, everyone's tired, you're not seeing a million people here. I wish more were here, but we do talk to them and hear what they have to say. And this is a big change in the project. Thank you all.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, Dawn Freiberger. Just very quickly, I have a son, young son, who is desperately trying to afford to buy a home and cannot because of the skyrocketing prices of real estate in this state, and of course the interest rates have just added to that. Having townhomes is a way for younger people to be able to get into the housing market, and there's a real need for it, and I'm not sure why we're taking that away. That's all.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Mark from Schufelt. So when this all began with the revisions, I started looking into rental apartments, not only just in Walpole, but across other towns. And when you look at some of the comments that rental people are leaving about the apartment complexes that they're living in, they're not very positive. And that concerns me. And I think that should concern everyone in this room. Speaking to police officers across other communities, the number one complaint that I have heard from a lot of them is that a lot of their calls are going towards rental communities. That also concerns me. So the other thing that somebody had brought up was the cost of rental apartments. The average studio in Walpole is around $2,000. One bedroom, $2,300 to $2,500. And it goes all the way up to $3,000. So this whole thing started with affordable housing. And now it's gone to non-affordable rents. And a lot of people are leaving or trying to leave because the rents are getting too expensive for them to stay. So again, we talked about what is the benefit for the community. There is no benefit for our community. And I really hope that you guys all make the right decision for the sake of our town. You guys have done an excellent job of bringing up this community. It's been recognized across other towns and people are moving in here. And what we're trying to do is create that American dream, right? For people to be able to say, I am proud of owning something, but I'm not proud of paying rent $3,000 to Fairfield Properties, okay? That to me was the why I agreed with the first plan, because it allowed people to move into the town, to be part of the community, and to have that American dream, to be able to say that I am proud of owning something, not paying rent. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Mr. Hamilton.
Hamilton Precinct 5. The ZBA is responsible for balancing regional housing needs with the following local concerns. Safety, number one. CSX abandoned the Summer Street Railroad ground crossing that abuts the 40B because it could not be made safe. The MBTA took over that crossing, and in my opinion, the 5 voting members of the ZBA must meet with the MBTA Chief Safety Officer. The 5 voting members have a duty to ensure the railroad ground crossing is safe before voting in favor of the changes to the 40B, or risk being deemed negligent for not performing their duty. Has the ZBA or Fairfield been in communication with a state agency or department in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that has notified them and you that they will be housing migrants in any of Walpole's hotels, motels, public housing, or any other type of emergency shelter? In my opinion, a high volume of transient people.
Mr. Chairman, this has nothing to do with the modifications. This hearing's about the modifications. Transient housing, whatever, nothing to do with.
Public hearing. Mr. Hamilton can speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In traveling over the railroad ground crossing with the existing traveling public increases the danger of a mass casualty event. I was an EMT and I attended many training sessions for mass casualty, and Summer Street is a disaster. The Select Board, road commissioners, along with the ZBA, will face liability issues if you don't have assurances from the MBTA that the railroad ground crossing is safe. You have many issues supporting or denying these changes, and safety is a big one. Any collision with a vehicle and train will derail the train, with only one entrance and exit for the 40B that would be wiped out by a train wreck. The health and safety of the 40B inhabitants would be at risk. The emergency exit must have a detail of 3 sworn police officers. Not easy to fill on a short notice for a long period of time. The HAC, if the HAC remands the changes back because you did your duty and denied these changes, let the HAC take the responsibility and the liability, let them risk their homes. Health is a major issue because this 40B is located in our Water Resource Protection Overlay District, Area 3, Zone 2, with a hydrology connection to the School Meadow Brook wellfield. If this 40B construction lowers the water table, the carcinogenic maximum allowed per trillion can be exceeded for lack of dilution. This is a health reason for denying this 40B change. Clear cutting all those trees over our Zone 2 sheds water from our Walpole's Drinking Water Zone 2. No longer reducing the dilution of the carcinogenic materials below drinking water standards. Another reason for denying this 40B. It insults the environment of South Walpole. The changes fail to meet the requirements for balancing regional housing needs in South Walpole, Massachusetts. It must be denied. It violates our safety and health concerns. The 40B design insults South Walpole's local environmental concerns. The 40B abuts Walpole's only combat zone, which has not been developed to date. This 40B can create the economy and incentive to develop the combat zone, a reason to deny these changes. Because of the adverse effect on South Walpole's health and safety. If this is,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hale.
well, no, I was going to mention that Mr. Hale is an abutter to this project. He has property in the combat zone. I'm not sure if it's the same David Hale, but since he spoke, I decided to skip that. So just give me a sense. A combat zone should not be next to the 40B. Such activity has historically increased murder and violence. Again, affecting the health and safety in South Walpole community and residents of the proposed 40B. Please vote no on the Fairfield changes. Save South Walpole by denying these 40B changes. This change creates two separate projects with two separate owners. In my opinion, it is two separate 40Bs. Such a modification is beyond the scope of a change to a comprehensive permit for one owner, one 40B, and should be denied. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments?
Mark Major, 11 Summer Street, abutter to the project.
Mr. Chairman, I object again. This is an ethics violation.
No, first off, you said that last time, and I told you, no, it's not. He has every right.
Doesn't mean it's true.
Well, I'm telling you, he has, do you think somebody doesn't have a right to speak in a public hearing?
Yeah, if they're on board, like, so the, Mr. Chairman, just briefly.
He's not sitting at the board.
He can speak to that, I can't stop it, but if you take a look at the website, state website, the prime example, and this is not me, just but look at it, in the, you know.
I actually looked at it last night, so what do you want to tell me?
It says the member, if he's a member of the board, he can't participate, we all agree with that. And it says, the correct conduct is the member of the board should leave the room and not participate in the hearing. That's what, I'm paraphrasing. If you think it's otherwise, so be it, okay?
And I've been advised in the past that
Okay,
it's acceptable, so.
Just please look at the state.
I have.
Okay?
I'll be quick.
You have all the time in the world.
So I do want to differentiate because we are just talking about the changes here. So my comments, there's still comments about the old project or the current project, which I don't think any of those concerns have changed, which is this is going to increase the traffic on a railroad crossing that's poorly designed already and needs to be fixed. So I guess to that point, I appreciate that the developer is willing to invest some more money into the railroad crossing that's already a problem. And if that becomes a quiet zone at some point, then so be it. But I don't think that changes the investment. Because of this development, that crossing needs to be upgraded. Full stop. And they should help pay for it. And I think we're talking about cost, and the reason this whole project change came about is because it's not feasible to build ownership units anymore in single families. I do think we should revisit how much was committed to originally, and potentially adjust that amount as well for all of the other costs that have increased since this project was originally discussed. The two things that I do think the board needs to just consider as far as the changes, one being you're losing the ownership options. That's a big deal. Like, that's the one thing this town really needs is affordable ownership houses. We don't have any of those. And what we thought we had is going, and I won't echo that because it's already been said several times. And it's also, I think, worth pointing out that we just don't have any projects right now that are really non-apartments for affordable housing. And we thought we were going to have them, and now there's less. So we have less options for people who are looking for affordable housing in Walpole because of this project change. So I think the one question that I think the board needs to just consider before making any decision is, because of the changes and the changes that are negatively impacting the community from the original project, has the developer offered enough to try to offset or mitigate some of those impacts? And I think that should lead you to a decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else?
I just have one more quick thing that I wanted to address, because you had brought up a good question. What can be done to this project to make...
Would you just identify yourself for the
Oh,
record?
I'm so sorry. Erica Verdon. You had asked what they could do to make the project, better for South Walpole, or what would make the neighbors happy. I think it brings us back to the biggest problem that we had, like from day one from this project, was that it's too big. It's just too big for the spot that it's going in. And unless they can mitigate that and decrease units by much more than they are, to be honest, I don't think there's anything that can be done personally that's going to mitigate, that's going to make anybody happy. I think the problem is that it's too large, and I don't know what they can do. Like, I don't think there's anything that can be done about that, to be honest. And I don't think there's anything that will compensate for that, to be honest. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hale.
For the record, I know nothing about combat zones. I'm not an abutter to the project. One of the points that's made repeatedly is that rents are too high. Rents are too high because it takes too long and it costs too much to get permits to build housing. And that's certainly true in this case. Rents are just a function of supply and demand, and there's a giant demand for housing in the state that this project, regional demand for housing, that this project would address. And it is what it is. It's a project that I'm proud of, that hundreds of families are going to live here over time, that will become part of the community, whether they own their homes or not. Their children will go to school. They'll be on the tennis team and the chess team, and that's the American dream today. And I will be proud of it forever. I don't have anything else to say.
I just would like, I appreciate the board has spent 3.5 years on this project, and I understand this is a change.
Could you just identify yourself for the record?
My name is Louis Levine. I'm an attorney for the applicant, 55F LLC. Really, the only issue before the board is whether or not the changes, modification to the original permit, creates any health, safety, and the like issues. The same criteria that the board used when they were issuing the original comprehensive permit or any other comprehensive permit that the board may sit on. There's nothing in the CMR statute that in any way distinguishes between rental or for sale housing, except how they're handled in terms of return on the developer's investment. But there's no reasoning in either one of those that says a board can turn down rental housing against or in favor of for sale housing. So I don't, and again, you have a very good town council. I mean, and sincerely, you can get that advice. But all the comments tonight, and I know they're sincere, and I'm not questioning them. I would question the factual, but I think that's a red herring to argue that. That's not really an issue for any board to consider. The issue is if your guidance here is a modification and a criteria to turn down or not like and therefore not allow the modification can't be the change from home ownership to rental. It's just not in the guidelines. It's not in the statute. Now, everyone can tell, their feelings about rental housing, and I understand that. And I'm not here to politicize. I mean, the board, town of Walpole, and other towns in the Commonwealth are aware of, the state's push for rental housing throughout, the entire state, and mandates beyond 40B now to provide rental housing. But in any event, just focusing on this application, and that's all I would ask the board to do. I'm not here to argue good points or bad points about the application. I'll just leave that up to you and your peer review and people like this. We're not reinventing the original application. We're not reinventing, you can't, the part of the project, which is going to be under construction pretty soon, the apartment part. So we were only focusing on the 56 units that was originally proposed to be for sale, townhouses, et cetera, as the chairman indicated, and now is being redesigned to be rental, and whether or not that creates any new health, safety, et cetera, issues. But that pivot, that criteria, can't turn on the fact that it's converting from for sale to rental. I understand what the chairman said about, promoting and certain people feeling good about community, and I'm not taking that away as, a reasonable sentiment. I don't mean that in any kind of...
I don't take it like that.
No, okay, but I want to make very clear about it, because I think a lot of the remarks today, are just, are floating around there, and it's people's, feel good feelings, but, we operate, fortunately or unfortunately for some, under a set of criteria. 40B has not been a popular statute since 1969, okay, but it is what it is, okay, and so this proposal is to reshape, remove, change, as David indicated, make a less impervious area, et cetera. And those are things for the board to rightfully look at. Is there going to be a detrimental effect on some infrastructure, drainage, things like that? Purposely, perfectly correct. But beyond that, if there's none of those issues existing, and I'm not here to say there are or aren't, then it's an allowable modification. Just like if we started all over again, it would have been allowable if this was entirely rental housing. The market dictates what one can build. And in the last 3.5 years, okay, things have changed dramatically. Okay, interest rates that were 3% are now 9%. Okay, and that dictates who can buy houses and what developers can build and make affordable. This project, with all due respect to the comments that were made, is still 25% now going to be affordable rents. So it's just that many more, and it adds to your SHI in terms of the town's classification. So all I'm asking the board to do, I'm not going to take any more time, is just please focus on, the nuts and bolts of this. Is there any problems with the infrastructure, the drainage, utilities, and things like that? That's what it's all about. And no more, no less. If the board comes to the conclusion there's a problem with something like that, then we should go through it and work it out, or, and see if we've come to a deadlock. If the board doesn't feel that the quiet zone is something they care about, then forget about it. That's all I can tell you. And no more, no less. If people don't want a quiet zone, then no quiet zone. I can't, but please just focus on, this is a change dictated by the marketplace. That doesn't make it right, and I mean that sincerely, that the board doesn't have to vote on it because the marketplace changes, but what the board has to vote on is, does it comply with the regulations? Is it safe? Is it healthy? And things like that. If they find it isn't, then they can indicate why, and we can try and change it. And if they can't find any problems with the project in terms of it being occupied and used, rental versus home ownership is really not a factor that one can rely on. And that's all I have to say. Okay? But thanks for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lee, this is the first time in 3.5 years I've been here publicly, so.
I was going to say, I saw you on the Zoom.
I know with Zoom, we've been
call
many
many
times on
times.
Zoom, but not directly.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Mark from Schufelt. So Mr. Hale was talking about how people that are going to be living there are going to be part of the community, part of the school systems, part of the tennis team. I don't understand how that's going to be the case when Fairfield had mentioned their average rental turnaround is 12 to 18 months. So how is that going to be the solution to what he was just saying, that how they're going to be part of the school systems, part of the tennis team, and part of our neighborhood? So the other thing is, Fairfield had mentioned that they have several properties in Massachusetts. So I looked up those properties as one of them, and I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. Is one of those properties in Milford called Quail?
Mark.
Yeah, sorry.
Everything to
So
the
Fairfield, so is one of those properties called Quail Apartments?
I can ask is there somebody from
Fairfield,
Fairfield who
yeah.
wants to answer that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. We have a property called The Quill.
Quill,
in
okay.
Dover.
Okay, so just so you guys are aware, and I'd like to find out what the going rent will be when this project is completed a year from now, 2 years from now. So just so you're aware, a one-bedroom, one-bath, 735 square feet in Milford, starting at $2,335. Is that affordable?
So.
I just want us to understand.
There's formulas that are used to determine what an affordable unit is. I don't know whether that one that you're referencing is affordable or whether it's a market rate.
It's just, I don't know. I'm just going to leave it at that, but that is just, to me, 2 years from now, what is that going to look like for a one-bedroom, 700 square feet, or studio? So I think we need to go back to what was approved and make that the green light and make this the red light, where we don't continue with this project.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Hamilton, we do have another hearing after this, so I'm going to ask you to keep it extremely brief.
I want to refute what the council said. We have a water resource protection overlay district. This project is ignoring it. Now, they can ignore snob zoning and local zoning. They cannot ignore the water resource protection overlay district. It is not local zoning. It was approved by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs and the DEP. I've been talking to the DEP and trying to get them to find the copy of our water resource protection overlay district, which they misplaced in Lakeville, and they don't have it in Boston. And if we can find that, it could cause a major redesign of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Mr. O'Leary, how are you this evening?
John O'Leary, Washington Street. Just a couple of clarifications so I get it straight in my mind. Major change is taking away the owned items and replacing them with additional rental units, is that correct?
That's correct.
What are the numbers involved? How housing are we losing and how many rentals are they adding to? Do you have those figures?
I do.
I was going to say, the number of units aren't changing, it's just the housing type. So it's
So-
268 units. If you're, before it was 200.
One house for one apartment?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. What's my other thought? I had another thought, I can't remember
If
it.
you think of it, you can come back.
Thank you.
We do have a peer review here. Sean, you reviewed this last time you had comments. Do you have anything else to add this evening?
No, just that they responded to all our comments. I found all the responses to be sufficient. There's some significant changes to the plans that people might not have noticed. There's a note that's been added that gives some real good clarity and specificity to how, there's been a lot of talk about infiltration rates and soil conditions. Gives real good clarity on how that's going to be resolved prior to construction. There's some really good positive changes, including the extension of the walk all the way to the emergency access. And then just in the interest of discussion, this project is pretty well connected to the community around it through paths. And there are no real obvious barriers to isolate the community. So as far as these types of communities are concerned, it's pretty open and accessible to the community around it. So just for what it's worth.
Thank you. Mr. O'Leary, did you?
My question was, when was the original project approved? What year? How long ago?
Mr. Hale, do you remember the exact?
2021.
2021.
April
Okay.
24th.
So in the fact, we're basically saying, okay, the economy is always going to be changing, but we'd be saying, okay, the economy's changed, you can come back now and we'll adjust things. Everyone has to live with the economy as it is. We shouldn't be required to adjust things just to benefit a developer. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Levine?
Can we just close the public hearing? We would ask to close the public hearing and to give you the
No,
time.
we still have time on this. We still have,
No, I know you have time. I'm saying, unless there's an agenda item that's missing.
well, I think what we want to do is we want to get some clarification on, any mitigation or anything like that, so.
Okay, and again, I'm just
What I'd like
basing
to
it on the remarks, the lack of remarks. There wasn't any discussion, so if you want to continue for that reason.
Well, I want to continue to make sure that the modifications are, acceptable and that they're taking into consideration what was already approved. One of the options would be for the zoning board to not approve the modifications and, say, we believe we had a good decision back in 2021 when this was approved, and go forward with that.
Well, again, I understand it, but your decision, and again, I'm not telling you how you have to do things or not to do things. I mean, I don't have that power. All I'm saying is, as I indicated before, it has to be based, on what the criteria are. And, based on what you just heard from your peer review person, I don't see, any hanging chad, so as to say, any outstanding issues based on the design, which to me is what the ultimate decision you have to make. Is design okay? Is it safe? And what I heard from your peer review, it is. Now, again, I'm not putting words in his mouth.
No, I know. We all
Okay,
heard
please,
it,
and don't somebody, but so I didn't hear any, problems that had to be, which I didn't, so that's kind of where I am. So I just kind of want to know, to move the process along, what's outstanding.
So I think what's outstanding is just how this modification, suits the needs of the town's need for affordable housing, and, is that going to be beneficial to the future development, because we know something's going in there, or is the existing decision that we had, is that one that the zoning board would stand by? So,
And again,
but I think what we should do is,
But as that, just my only comment would be, and I, do understand what you said, but as I said before, none of those criteria are part of the consideration in the CMRs. It's really, is it a problem in terms of design, infrastructure, et cetera? Again, whether or not it's rental versus housing and for sale, whether you prefer one to the other, that's not a criteria that this board could. But again, I can only say that. You can do what you think is appropriate.
right. So what I think we can do is we can continue this until November, not November, October 11th. Okay. So continue this until October 11th,
So,
and,
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
if we're going to continue it, why? What is it that you want to know that we haven't already presented? I don't have anything else. So I don't know how to prepare for the next hearing.
So I think that what we're looking at is something that, ties us to the community. We've said that.
So
we've
that
said
has
all along.
nothing to do with the criteria, which is what Mr. Levine just said. So I'm sticking to the criteria. If it's not in the criteria, there's nothing to discuss.
Okay.
So I would suggest that
We
we close the
have
hearing.
time, the public has a right to speak on this. We still have until, from the time you filed, we have 180 days to complete this hearing. So, we can take our time on this and go out until
I would just add, I mean, not to, obviously, it's the board's purview and direction.
October 11th would be the next hearing.
Yeah. But in terms of, I know we did have a draft decision that was reviewed, and we did get revised plans, I believe, last Thursday, or actually, we really got them Friday when we were able to get back to work. I know peer review has taken a brief look at them, and may be beneficial to take another review just to make sure everything has been addressed accordingly.
I
Take-
can certainly issue a final letter, that's
Yeah.
not a problem.
Take a look at the final plans that they submitted, and we can meet back here on October 11th, 7 PM. Is that acceptable to board members? Okay, could I have a motion to continue this hearing until October 11th at 7 PM here at Town Hall?
So moved.
Moved by Judy,
Second.
second by Tim. Any further discussion?
Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay. Thank you. Okay, why don't we take about 5 minutes, and then we're going to set up for the next hearing, which is for the Gilmore site.
Maybe this will help? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
You good to go?
Okay,
Yep.
thank you, members of the board. We appreciate it. For the record, Jeff Engler, a member of the development team. On, I believe it was Friday, we had made a submittal to the town that we think has been fairly comprehensive and responsive to some of the questions, outstanding issues that we've heard over the course of the first two public hearings. We do not plan to present everything we've submitted. Frankly, some of the things were submitted for the record for Mr. Reardon and his team as they start to dig into the peer review. We submitted an updated plan set. We submitted an updated landscaping plan, stormwater management plan. We're not going to present those things tonight. We're going to focus on a couple of the engineering issues. We're going to focus on a quick overview of parking, and then talk a little bit about the architectural package that we submitted. And then obviously, you know, be happy to answer any questions that we will endeavor to, if we cannot answer tonight, come back at the next hearing. We would anticipate that Tetra Tech and Sean will start to ramp up their peer review now that they're fully engaged, and, you know, at subsequent hearings will be focused on their scope of services. So with that said, I think how I would like to proceed, unless the board has any questions to start us off, is I think we're going to talk about the sidewalk plan that we've prepared and vetted with the town, talk a little bit about the fire truck turning movement analysis, and then, as I said, parking and architecture. So if the board doesn't have any questions, I'm going to turn it over to Eric from Bowler, who's going to just talk through the sidewalk plan and that exhibit that we submitted.
Good evening, Eric DeBrule, Bowler Engineering. I've had various conversations with town engineer Carl Baldoof about the multiple options that we provided for his review for the sidewalk extension. This is the last option that we finally came up with a resolution with Carl, who he agreed that was his preferred option. Effectively, what we're seeing here, the top right of the plan, obviously you can see the development area. And what we're proposing to do is to cross our driveway with a crosswalk and then extend along the MBTA property a new sidewalk all the way to the point where there's an existing flashing beacon and existing crosswalk there today. A couple notable items. Carl requested that we relocate the existing landing of that crosswalk. It's slightly into private property, so we're just relocating that closer to the right-of-way and making sure it's fully inside of the right-of-way. That's just moving by several feet. And then just ensuring that we keep all of the proposed sidewalk inside of the right-of-way. Just requires slightly narrowing the shoulder of that road. And again, Carl generally reviewed it and was in favor of this. I'm sure most of us realize that that property there is flush along that frontage there, so we are proposing a new curb cut. And again, Carl reviewed it and was generally aligned with this plan. I think that really highlights the sidewalk piece of it. And if no one has questions on this, we can move
Nope.
to the.
I do have a question.
Sure, perfect.
So, first off, thank you for addressing this. This solves one of the issues. What about last time we were here, you were showing a sidewalk right in front of your building.
So a crosswalk coming across the street?
Coming across. Is that still going to be there?
That will not be there. This would
Okay.
be
So,
replacing this.
so somebody leaving your building, the two ways to get out of that area would be to go down to Glenwood and cross there, the one you're showing here, and then the other one would be to walk up to Main Street and cross at the crosswalk there.
Correct.
Okay. Good, thank you.
So,
I did have a question.
Bob?
Go ahead, Judy.
Is there any reason why you couldn't have two sidewalks? Because human nature is people are going to cross there without a sidewalk there. You took one out. I thought you were going to
Yeah, no, this is the plan that the town engineer wanted and supported. So we defer to his preferences. You know,
Well,
I also had concern if we had 3 crosswalks, it would it would be too much.
Where's 3?
Well, this, the one at Glenwood,
Yeah.
we just talked about.
If that's already there, yeah.
Right, and then another one coming off, yet last time we were here, they were proposing one right in front of the building.
Correct.
And that's also a little bit on a turn, I think this is I think it's better to just have the 2 as opposed to a third one in there.
I'm not seeing the third one. I see
So-
Glenwood and I see
Main Street.
Mr. Chair.
Main Street on the other end of town, on the other.
So there's the crosswalk that goes from east, close to Elm. So on the intersection of East and Elm, there's the one by Glenwood, and then there's the one by Main. So the one that's being removed would have been 4 crosswalks essentially along that stretch of road. So I think that's why they proposed to remove that one.
Yeah. I mean,
Well-
go ahead, Sean.
If I could add real quickly, so the one that's being removed is called a mid-block crosswalk, which are generally not preferred because crosswalks shouldn't happen at intersections. So substituting a crosswalk at an intersection for a mid-block one is always preferred.
I'm happy. I think it makes it safer.
I travel that road 100 times a day, and to not have that, to not have access to cross the street, mid-block or whatever you want to call it, closest to your front door, I think is not a good idea. I'd like to see that to be considered.
What's the destination that you're concerned about? Because I want to be respectful of your request, but what is the destination at the mid-block that you're getting to that's such a driver of the traffic? I don't mean this disrespectful.
I understand, but I just think that
You're going to make a left or a right, I don't know, other than the small little office building across the street from us, it's not a huge driver. Where's the destination that would drive you to be like, okay, I'm going to walk across the street to get to the other sidewalk versus going out of the right or the left? That's what I'm just trying to get to is,
Okay.
what does the mid-block accomplish?
just that I think it's human nature, if somebody wants to come out the front door of the building, they're going, and they want to go to the opposite side of the street, I think human nature is they're gonna cross the street and walk up the bottom, or I don't know what direction we're talking about, southerly sidewalk to go down to the lights at Main Street. That's my opinion. I'm just saying, I see it a lot.
Well,
I see it a lot, and I understand the mid-block, nice to know a new term, you learn a new word every day. But, you know, I'm just seeing people just crossing and not having the protection of a crosswalk, that's all.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, just for the record, you know, we vetted several different options with the town engineering department, and this is the one that they felt very strongly about, and this is the one we're presenting tonight. And, you know, this is the one we feel good about, so. Yeah, as does the town engineer.
I too had a conversation with the town engineer, and we did discuss the mid-block crosswalk. So. Something changed between my conversation and your conversation.
Question. Just quickly on the new curb cut, has the MBTA been involved with sort of design, you know, how wide that's going to be? I guess my concern is that they're going to say, hey, you know, we got to get stuff in and out of there, and we're not happy with the size of it. I'm just curious if there's been any back and forth with them on that.
Yeah, so we haven't had discussions directly about this specific plan on the driveway location, but in speaking with Carl, town engineer, I brought that up, so obviously it's going to be something to consider, and effectively what he said was, well, we've got to put it somewhere, and the town has the rights to do that in their right-of-way, and if, should the MBTA ever do something on that property, they'd reapply for a curb cut, at which point it could be relocated or changed. So I think the idea is it's got to be, there needs to be a driveway. It can't just be 100 feet of open frontage.
Right.
So this plan would close it down. If they ever needed to develop and change it, they could provide an application and do that.
Thanks.
Yeah, those were Carl's comments. I don't know if Eric made that clear, not
Okay,
Eric's
right.
judgment. Those were Carl's comments.
Right.
We're going to move on to the fire truck circulation plan. One of the comments from the fire chief, we just wanted to clarify, so I spoke directly with Chief Barry, just to clarify his comment about having one-way circulation on site. I think it was his comment number 2 of his comment letter. So he just clarified that comment to me, and effectively he was just wanting to make sure the fire truck circulation didn't cross lanes of traffic. So we refined the truck circulation plan just to tighten up some of those turns, just to make sure those turning movements are, limit any of those crossing areas. There are a couple of areas, but again, we significantly limit those areas. And he also, as part of that call, thanked the applicant again for providing the 360-degree access around the site. Obviously, it's not required by code, but certainly the applicant wanted to provide that. So I think this plan meets the intent of the code that he was referencing. So we just wanted to update and then re-provide that to you with some explanation there.
And just, I don't see the letter here, but the fire chief was good with this, makes the turning radius, we'll get a letter from him saying that everything's good.
So he's not reviewed this plan. I spoke to him to clarify his comments. So I don't know at this point.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we just received these on Friday, so
That's
no
right.
one's got this yet.
Okay, so, okay. But it looks like it's gonna be okay.
We would hope so. I
Yeah,
mean, the fire department has every, expectation to, if they want to submit an additional letter, would be happy to review it.
Yep. Okay.
But this exhibit was in response to the previous letter, so. So I think what we'd like to do now is, my partner Justin Krebs is just going to talk a little bit about parking and the parking narrative that we submitted for the record.
Thank you, Justin Krebs, for the record. And again, I don't want to belabor this. It did come up, so there were questions with parking. We really wanted to just revisit a couple of quick things to remind people that the fundamental driver of parking is a bedroom count. A studio or a one-bedroom typically is not going to drive the same as what a two-bedroom or a three-bedroom. I wanted to highlight, because we didn't highlight that as well here, we're approximately 70% studios and one bedroom. The other two projects that were referenced here that are in close proximity, Liberty Station is only 48%. And the Corcoran project at West Union and West, I apologize, is only 53%. So on a material basis, they are 18 to 22 or 3% more two bedrooms. That really drives down to where we try to frame this on the parking spaces per bed. And if you look at where we are, we're more or less banded within Union and West at 0.81 spaces per bed. Liberty Station at 0.92, and then basically 1015 where we are at 0.87. It does translate into a rate when you look at a space per actual unit where we're at 1.2, so we're at the lower end, but that's really because of that fundamental difference in the unit mix, meaning that they have 20% more bedrooms effectively because of that two-bedroom differential, just to try to take it to a mean. And I don't want to belabor it. We're happy to get into any detail as needed. The next piece I did want to just highlight is, we've included details that were requested with regard to parking plans, how they'll be managed, how they'll be done, how it'll be enforced. We'll have a professional management company. Each person will be issued a parking tag. The one thing I want to be key is many people will decide to have either assigned parking or unassigned parking. An assigned space means you get number one, you park your car there. If you are not parking in that space, nobody else is doing it, but they're not utilizing it. So utilization becomes weak. We looked at this in a real tangible way at another project which we have, which I think is very similar to this, and we had MDM, another traffic engineer, study basically our parking counts during the time frame. And this is the piece that's highlighted. This project is in Framingham, basically identical proximity to the train station effectively. like here, which was concerns that were raised about not having a grocer or someone downtown, very similar environment. There is not any service there. You have to go to Route 3 to get to any of the food, Route 9 to get to any of the services, et cetera. But the overall dynamic is very similar. What I want to highlight is we in that project, and that project also again has a heavier weight towards studios and one bedrooms. So our overall count at that project is effectively a 1-to-1. It's 258 spaces that we have. It's 258 units. 7 of those are handicapped. So the net number of spaces that are actually occupiable through the tenancy is 251. On that basis, we did a direct study both weekday and weeknight over a 24-hour period on the amount of spaces that were done. And on this chart, the first I'll talk about, during the daytime, during the weekday peak, what we found was of those 251 spaces, only 221 were occupied. During that basically means there's about 12% surplus supply available for guests, for other people that come in and out of that traffic pattern. It also shows, as you go, a deep skew towards the midday hours and some complements where people are out and have that traffic flow, where we're down to 100 people in those spaces. So there is a fair amount of flexibility. We would have ours, as I said, unassigned, I'm sorry, thank you, Jeff, unassigned, but we would manage them with tags. So we will know, and if somebody was parking there that wasn't either assigned a visitor pass or wasn't assigned an actual tenant pass, they'll be towed, it'll be enforced. But we believe that this demonstration from what we think is a similar project is kind of consistent with that overall Metro West analysis that said the underutilization of spaces. But it goes to the core. If you assign a space, you have no flexibility to the utilization, and that can cause issues if you don't have the spaces available for a guest or a management. So, from a high level, and again, we are happy to dig into our overall narrative further, but I think the core takeaway is bedroom count is material to this analysis for parking. Our bedroom count is significantly higher in one bedrooms and studios than the rest at 20% more. So that means really 20% less bedrooms in that 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom realm. And then we had same questions that were raised by you. We did this count on a project that's finished. It's been occupied for 2 years, and this is actually the data that came out of that, looking at it and monitoring that parking by a licensed professional parking and traffic consultant, MDM, at that project in Framingham. So with that, I'll close unless anybody has questions, and happy to answer those or take the opportunity to dig in further.
Sure, it sounds like you got a pretty good plan here in place for managing your property. What stops your tenants from parking in other areas? Specifically speaking, public parking within that area, like business parking, excuse me. Is there any control that you guys, control measures you would have with that?
Yeah, no, Jeff, I mean, I think at the end of the day, very much to what Ms. Conroy said with regard to natural selection, right? Why would you park in a location that, if we have spaces, and we believe based on the math and the studies on the others, there will be available spaces for visitors or guests or otherwise. So we don't see why anybody would go park off the street. If you look at that, the closer parking, and I would argue their project over in Liberty Place actually has spaces that are public and that run that line. We don't have public spaces that are on the line of East Street. We have sufficient parking, so I don't know why, I guess I'm just saying, I don't know why somebody would be compelled to not park on the site.
Okay.
Fair response.
No, I mean, it is, I guess my concern in talking to local businesses, a lot of them say the parking's a nightmare in downtown Walpole, so, and not to rebut Framingham compared to Walpole, but I don't agree that that's a fair comparison. I don't know if you do foot studies as far as how many people travel to actually get on the train. I think that'd be a valid point too, because you're basing a lot of your parking assumptions that off of people use an MBTA and travel into the train and whatnot. I've driven down that street every morning. I see a couple handful of cars in the parking lot and a couple people walking down the street. It's not a mass group of people that are traveling there. So I'm not disagreeing with your points here. I think they're valid. I guess I'm curious if they're realistic or not.
On the MBTA is very similar to what yours is, which is it's significantly limited. Framingham, it's really, other than between like 7:30 and 8, it's an every hour train line. Participation and inward flow is very limited from a use standpoint. So again, when I say the context, the overall dynamic, I would say utilization of that station to go into the city, or I guess if you were going out of it, it would be similar, because we have very low participation rate on that, from that train station. Although we're by the train station and it's a nice amenity, the participation in ours is probably less than 10% from a ridership standpoint. And so it's not a significant impact, where I would argue every tenant we have in that building largely depends on a vehicle to go to their work or to some location based on that.
Right.
We're not getting tremendous relief like an urban location where you might get ridership of 50%, and there are people who are electing not to have a car to park.
Well, like I think Judy had mentioned at the last meeting, we don't have, the grocery store right there where you can walk to, and I understand, but there is gonna be a need for cars, and making sure that there's
Well, we
ample
agree,
of.
but that's, I just, and why I'm trying to say the likeness is downtown Framingham has no grocery store specifically to
Right.
service the community. So our tenants need to get in a car and go to Route 9 to go to the Whole Foods or to the Public or go to whatever the grocery store is on that end. And then at the same time, I like I said, ridership is there. So we were just trying to present, and I don't want to make it that we're saying it's exactly like kind, but it follows the same narrative of that study that was presented by the overall Metro West as far as utilization of parking in that context, and then goes a step further, which says we actually looked at it because we heard a similar request. We had an asset that was finished, and we thought that it was relative. We're doing a second phase there, so it was asked, well, what is your actual utilization on it? So we looked at it tangibly.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Your points are fair.
Yeah.
We're just trying to extrapolate the best information we can, what we think is the most similar. If we told you our project in Brookline, only had a ratio of 0.7 cars, then I'd be like, yeah, you're an idiot, that's not the same thing here. And I'm saying myself on that end. But I think it's like kind of at least use and basis for that. So-
Okay.
We know Corcoran pretty well. I mean, I serve on a not-for-profit board. Corcoran's a management company. We know their development team. They've had no issues with parking at their site. And if you guys are not too tired when you come by, it'll be late, so you would think that most people are home. Drive by and look in their parking lots and see how many spaces are available. There's a bunch. So we feel, to your point, people using the train, it's a bonus. We think the parking stands on its own if the ridership is zero, and we think the numbers bear that out. So we feel comfortable. I mean, it doesn't make good business sense or business practice for us to be underparked. And then to talk about, if theoretically, and we very much do not think this will happen, but if people were parking or overflowing, the town has recourse, just like they do on people parking on streets that they're not supposed to overnight or in areas. They can tow, they can ticket.
I
So
completely
they have
understand that.
yeah.
I think it just puts a burden on the town to be monitoring your developments, people off
Sure.
site.
We
And I will say to your numbers, and I think it's good, but it's also a little bit of low-hanging fruit to pick on the two other developments directly abutting or nearby yours, which obviously have major parking issues. And obviously, your numbers are better than that, but that doesn't mean they're the right numbers.
Well, I respectfully, I would disagree that Corcoran has major parking issues. On what basis do you think they have major parking issues?
Actually, I want to agree with you. So I don't always agree with people that appear before the board. I've been watching, I go by Union West all the time. I live out that side of town. And I've been driving through there probably more than I should. And what I'm seeing is there is ample parking at all days of the week, all hours. And I was really surprised that method of, what did you call it?
Unassigned.
Unassigned parking, it seems to be working. I have never seen a situation where they were at capacity. I've also looked at Liberty Station, and there's a lot of vehicles parked on Elm Street and also on Glenwood, and they have assigned parking. And I think, do you want to comment on that? I saw you had your hand up. Did you?
Yes, I would, if
Just-
you can give me a minute
Yep.
to comment on it,
Yep.
while we're still on the parking.
Yeah, we're talking parking right now, and I also read the MPC report, Metropolitan Planning Council, and they're saying pretty much what you folks are saying as far as the parking, but, yeah, do you want to just explain
sure.
your situation? You're with Liberty, right?
Yeah, so Steve Meltzer from Liberty Station. So we do have a major parking problem, and we probably multiple times a week are in contact with the police with regard to dealing with the issue. There is a real problem in downtown Walpole with available parking spaces. And some of the things that they brought up, we just don't think bear out. And number one, I just don't think it's an apt comparison to the Framingham project to this project. And I can tell you that I understand the Liberty Station project well, but I also understand the Framingham project well because I live a mile and a half from that project, and I also serve on the City of Framingham Zoning Board of Appeals. So I know what's going on there and how it's different, and it is quite different. So it's really not a good comparison.
Hey, everything.
It's a different town.
Everything
It's
through
a
the.
completely
everything
different
through the
town.
board.
Everything is different about the downtown.
Yep.
The location is
Hey.
different. All right.
Everything through the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our parking, we have added, we're adding lifts in our parking lot. We are also contracted for additional spaces outside of our own parking. Our ratios now will go up to 1.6 on per unit parking spaces and 1.06 per bed. And that will still probably not be enough. What they're arguing to you is that somebody who rents a studio is less likely to have a car than somebody who rents a one-bedroom. It has to, logically, it has to be what they're saying. Because they're saying that they have less bedrooms, and therefore their ratios should be even less than our ratios, because they're studios. Their ratios should at least be equal to our ratios, and they probably should be higher than ours because ours are not sufficient. This is a real issue. The reason why we came the first time at the first hearing to raise this issue, and the second time at the second hearing to raise this issue, and we're back today, is because they haven't actually done anything about it in their project proposal. They've added a narrative, they've showed us Framingham, but they have a highly competent traffic engineer in MDM Transportation. Where is MDM's study on parking? Why don't we have that? And why isn't that parking study able to be submitted so that it can be peer-reviewed?
That parking study would have to have an existing asset to measure.
So, at Liberty, you folks are using assigned parking, right?
We are.
Yeah.
And it may be true that unassigned parking may help this situation. I don't know the answer to that, but you know who would? It's perhaps a traffic engineer.
I always was thinking assigned parking would be the best way to do it, until I started observing the, they're showing some data. I'm seeing real live
But
right through the parking lot.
The other concern I have with their parking plan is that they're going to be charged for parking, which means you don't get a parking space if you get an apartment. You have to pay extra for it. And that, to me, sounds like a disincentive for folks who have vehicles to pay for their parking and then use the parking on site, which will be forcing more people to try and find parking outside of their site. We have that situation when we have residents who have 2 cars, and we can't accommodate 2 cars, and we tell them that you can't have 2 parking spaces. They tell us, okay, we'll only have 1 car, and then we later find out that they have 2 cars, and they're trying to park those cars on the town streets, and it's causing a real problem. I just, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think it's really important that you understand that we feel that this is a health and safety issue for our residents as well as for the residents in town as well. And they have poo-pooed it. They're poo-pooing it behind my back right now. And I think it's an important issue, and it's an important issue for the downtown of Walpole. Because they're just going to take a situation that's difficult and make it worse if they don't provide sufficient parking at their site. And that's all we ask that they do, is provide sufficient parking. Thank you for your time.
I think everybody here recognizes parking on something like this. This is critical. We got to get it right. So
yeah, it's a difficult issue. It's a difficult issue that we deal with every day. And
okay. Yeah, and I know you've been here. This is the 3rd hearing you've had somebody here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Judy?
I do have a couple of questions, and I know you want to speak to something else, but how many guest spaces are going to be there? If you're going to have unassigned parking, how many guest spaces are going to be part of your project?
We'll have visitor spaces, I think, like 8 visitor spaces.
So come the holidays and the weekends when your tenants have guests, and everybody's home, and everybody has company, where are they all going to park?
Well, not everybody's coming. Well, I think that's framing the narrative for yourself. That's not framing an appropriate narrative.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
That are based on fact.
So go ahead, Judy.
I am going to frame the narrative because this is what happens. It's life in Walpole Center. John mentioned Union and West. Go by later on at night when the cars are lined up at both sides of the train driveway overnight. That's where their overflow parks in Union and West.
There'd be no overflow because they have more capacity than they need. They have the ancillary lot. They have it around the building. They don't have the spaces. I went by there at 7:45 today again to check in. We can go back there. They have sufficient spaces. This comes down to how parking is managed, how the management company addresses that. Corcoran is successful on an unassigned basis in being able to manage it. We also want to clarify one thing. We are not saying that a studio and a 1-bedroom are different. They are a bedroom, whether it's a studio or a 1-bedroom. It would then have usually 1 resident in that or 2 that have a car. It is the differential between the 2-bedroom count. They are 54% 2 bedrooms. We are less than 20, or we are 22% roughly 2 bedrooms. There's a material difference between that gap of that 20% of bedrooms that has an impact on parking. So I can see potentially why they have issues. 1, I think it's the assigned versus the unassigned. 2, it is absolutely the bedroom count on impact, and we're more than comfortable in having opinions from the town peer review from Mr. Reardon, if that was the case. 3, we cannot present what he requested. Framingham was done because it's an existing asset. We know what was permitted, and we know what the utilization is. Those are factual. We can't present a parking analysis on an asset until it exists. That's why we tried to draw the comparison in Framingham.
So, Mr. Reardon.
Just have one quick thing.
Yep,
So
Mr. Reardon.
using Judy's example of holidays, right? So-
Or weekends.
Or weekends.
Thank you.
So to illustrate the difference between unassigned parking and assigned parking and why one might work better than the other. So on a holiday weekend, right? Yeah, this place might be a hopping place, but more people are gonna be going to other parties at other locations. When they leave, their cars go with them. In an unassigned scenario, people that are visiting, the people that are staying, can use those spaces. In an assigned scenario, all the people that are coming in have to use the limited visitor spaces. So instead of having, so say you have in a unit of, a building of 100 units, 6 people are having parties. Reasonable, right? 2 people each party, 12 people. If they only have 8 visitor spots, 4 people are out of luck. But if it's unassigned spots, then there's just as many people leaving that building to go to other parties, clearing up spots so those visitors can come in and use those spots. I don't know if that was illustrative, but it.
No, I understand what you're saying, so I'm going to go back to the Corcoran project at Liberty and Union, or whatever it's called, Union and West. The lot, the old MBTA lot, by the train tracks, by the bridge on Elm Street, is their overflow parking. It was part of a planning board decision that if you lived there and you came home at 11 o'clock at night and couldn't find a place to park, you were directed to go park at the bottom of the hill, walk up the alley beside the train track and go into your building. Now, that is suddenly off topic, a paid parking lot now for MBTA train use, so that's another issue. But they did plan for overflow parking. That was their overflow.
But they,
Haven't needed it.
Corcoran was noticed for this application. They're not attending any hearings. They don't have a parking issue. As the chairman said, we would recommend the board go by their lot during, morning peak, evening peak hour. See if it's full. It's not going to be full. They have unassigned. They're a really good development company that knows how to manage their residents and their tenants. They do not have a parking issue. And their proposal is very analogous to ours. And they're very comfortable with how they're parked, as are we. And we believe the MAPC study, which we submitted with either the original application or the first public hearing, I forget, but it's now a matter of record, stands on its own, as does the additional information that we've provided. So we feel comfortable. You see our site plan. There's no other spaces available. We're not going to be bringing in another 30 spaces because we don't need it. We feel comfortable with the plan as proposed, and we believe we've submitted more than ample technical information, not anecdotal, not subjective, technical information that supports our ratio. And we point to the Corcoran project again as right across the street, similar dynamics, similar context, that's doing just fine and does not have a parking issue.
And Mr. Reardon, you'll review this, you'll do a full peer review of this anyway, so.
And we've already looked at the parking numbers, and they're in a reasonable range, right? But we're comparing to sort of a mass of data that's out there. We have asked for some additional information that may be in the new information that's been provided. But, clearly this is something that we're gonna have to spend some time looking at, and just keep in mind, assigned parking versus unassigned parking, apples and oranges. Can't draw any correlation between the two. So don't even consider them in the same sort of realm. So it's almost, just don't even think that they're gonna function the same way.
Okay, anybody have anything else on parking? We've beat this a bit, and I do appreciate your comments, because you're living it across the street.
I do have one, I guess it's a question.
Do you want to just come up for the microphone?
Oh, sure. And I guess partly for my own edification, with respect to the difference between assigned and unassigned, I think your point was folks who are guests can use the unassigned spots, but I thought that only folks who have parking stickers are able to use the spots on your lot.
Visitors would register. We have a good management protocol. There is the registration. If you are a visitor, you register with the management company and you get a tag. That's generally how we operate on our project.
So you can have unlimited number of guest spaces?
I would say this, unlimited, you just said that, I didn't say that. Operationally, as Mr. Reardon highlighted, you have inflows and outflows, and even at peak capacity on this, we have additional capacity in the Framingham project of 30 or 40 spaces, depending on the time period. 30 at the absolute peak. Optimization, midweek, we have 30 spaces more. That seems pretty sufficient as a ratio of visitors to be able to park in that, and that's in the optimal time. Holidays, as you highlighted, then goes to another thing, because people leave and go away as much as they may come. And also argue that people tend to go see their family in other places, so that dynamic creates further capacity. Look at the capacity on the weekends in the study. It drops even further. Most likely, when you have visitors, you're gonna have them on the weekend. It actually, this parking flow and the unassigned piece is a very tangible statistical thing that's being analyzed, not only by consultants like this, not only by every developer out there, but by organizations like the MAPC and others who are presenting this data, because at the end of the day, you also don't want to have more parking than is necessary, because that doesn't benefit anybody and creates other problems. But it comes down to the apples and oranges comment. Unassigned parking creates that. Visitors can utilize those spaces, and it's managed to, if you're having guests and visitors come, you're going to be able to register and have them. If we got to a place where we had a capacity issue, then we'd be there. These counts in Framingham that have that have people who were visiting on those days in these stats. So these stats are showing 30 additional spaces with the tenancy and the normalization of an event of a visitor being there. And we don't have issues. So I don't think there's a peak period that offsets these where there's not 30 spaces plus a handful of people already parking as visitors in those spaces in those counts. I think they're pretty factual, and I think it's supported, and we're welcome for any commentary that comes out of peer review that's based on technical information.
And that's what we're going to wait for. We'll get the peer review comments.
And I appreciate the response.
And again, listen, we all do well if we're doing, we don't want a bad environment of an apartment community. We all want it to be a good environment for the community.
Quick question on the data that was provided. Is that key to occupancy as well, or was the facility at 100% occupancy at the time they did it?
94.6%.
Do you have that number as part of the information that was submitted?
I believe it's actually in there.
Okay.
It says actually, it's listed this way. I think it says, based on 242 units observed as opted against the 258. So it's basically a 94% ratio, might be 1% below our norm, but it runs statistical. And we also have looked at Corcoran's occupancy levels, which run from 94 to 95 at that same level. So they're not seeing a lack of occupancy. They're seeing what is a normalized 94-95%.
Okay. Board members, anything more on
I just have
parking?
one more
Okay.
question.
Judy, yes.
Will your data, someone's data, provide the residents per studio, number of residents per studio? Because you claim that a studio might be one, but I have experience with rentals, and a studio sometimes can be two, and two people, two residents. So do you have that data that's?
It can be two, but it doesn't mean they're going to have two.
It
Well,
would be.
this is what excuse me, sir.
I thought you were
I'm
asking a question.
I'm asking the question, and I don't know who's going to answer yet, but
So
apparently
just-
Justin's going to.
No,
Or
just
someone's
finish your
going to.
question.
I'll finish my question. I'd like to know residents per unit and how many cars per unit that you have, because a studio doesn't always have just one person and one car, or
Can I-
one person
Justin,
and no car.
No, the parking stat is based on a unit. Whether whether a studio is occupied by 3 people or 1 person. The data that's demonstrated on the parking demand demonstrates whether there's 3 people or 1 person in that studio, the demand is the same. There is still additional availability to the range of somewhere between 12 and 18% between weekday or weekend. So it does not matter how many people occupy a unit, because they're being picked up. If we're 95% occupied and we have additional spaces, whether there's 2 people in the unit or not, they must have 1 car. If there's 3 people in the unit, they must have 1 car. It's driven off of how many cars are in those units. So it's not really relevant to the amount of people. I mean, I also can tell you somebody's in the studio, there's 3 people, and 2 of them are children. They don't drive.
Mr. Chairman, we're limited by the Massachusetts health and, health code relative to, we're not going to be packing people into these units. It's not the demographic. The point is, we obviously don't know that information. We haven't built this project. We haven't leased it up. If the studios can be leased to a single person, a couple, the one bedroom, two bedrooms, I mean, we could tell you, what other projects, how they've leased up, but I couldn't tell you, who's going to be living in this building. I mean, we just know the bedroom mix, and the bedroom mix is very low. Studios in one, 72%. So based on industry metrics, it's going to be fewer people than 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom. And that's a fact, but I couldn't tell you if we have 20 studios that 12 of them are going to be single occupants and 8 are going to be couples. We'll see what the market bears.
But the data presented, just to be very clear, assumes that a unit, whether occupied, a studio occupied by 3 or by 1, in the analysis is generating a parking flow that still has additional parking on 30 on a signed basis.
It's getting late. What I'm seeing is, we're talking statistics, and you're asking for like real.
I would be happy if you could tell me that information from your Framingham facility. I'm not asking you to predict the Gilmore project. I'm asking for that information on what you've already leased up in another location.
We can go on Framingham and ask occupants per studio.
And cars. I'd like the cars too.
No, the cars.
No.
This is an actual analysis of parking data based on.
But you can simply find out how many parking stickers you've issued.
Yeah.
That's I'm asking something pretty simple. I don't care about your 1.6.
You just give the information and argue the point.
We'll give the information, and we'll endeavor to provide that relative information.
Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on.
Yes. And we're not done with parking either. This is important. Yeah.
So we're going to hopefully quickly go through our updated architectural images, as well as kind of a theoretical exercise we went through. So for that, I'll turn it over to Steve Riegel from Embark, the project architect, to walk through the package that we submitted.
Thank you, board members. I'll try and be even more brief and succinct, as you've all been here for a while. I don't know if we have what's available on the screen, but
It goes to sleep mode. You gotta.
just getting back to, the massing and exterior design that we've talked about when we've come in here. What we've arrived at has been revised and enhanced as a result of direct feedback received during the public hearing process from both the ZBA and various municipal departments. When we first approached the town over a year and a half ago, we had a much different building. We had a 65-story foot building that was basically pulled up to East Street as we were fronting and trying to sort of maximize the unit count on the project. Immediately as we started to work with the town, there were concerns about creating such a canyon-like setting, and that what we finally arrived at was a building that had greater setbacks than what's required under current zoning. We worked with the facades to break up the massing and provide more visual interest. The building now intersects itself with East Street on non-rectilinear angles and provides opportunities for public engagement, resulting in volumes that break up the massing to a more residential scale. In addition, the ground floor of the building was designed in a way to respond to municipalities' requests to front East Street with more of our active uses in the building while keeping our ground floor residences to the rear. I think one of the big things that we need to highlight is the fact that we worked with the fire department, and this is possibly the 4th or 5th iteration of the building where we've been moving the building around the site in order to address the various comments from the various municipalities, and where before we came in with a 4 or 5 story building that was much larger, we've now sort of pulled the building away from the property line, increased its height, but provided for 360-degree fire truck access around. So really what we've arrived at has been, the basis of a year and a half of working with the town. The latest version of the plans feature some additional enhancements to the front facades. We've used a combination of exterior facade materials and locations to break up the massing of the building.
Do you want me to go to the rendering?
Whatever you feel is appropriate. Larger portions of the front building facades have been broken up both vertically and horizontally by fiber cement of varying sizes, colors, and textures to make a more sophisticated look. The use of more traditional building storefront and built-up cornices at the street level serve to engage the pedestrians, while we've introduced some upper floor setbacks to create new outdoor living spaces and provide more visual interest. Some of the other changes include siding and trim, articulation of the top floor, reduction of cornices, all changes that have been effectuated to further diminish the perceived height of the building while also resulting in a more visually interesting building. Now, what you're going to see in the packet is you're going to see images that were taken at the same location as our current design of a theoretical building. This theoretical building is a warehouse, a commercial building, something that is, allowed by right within this area. And so what we're showing is we're showing a 55-foot building. It's actually 52 feet with an allowable 3-foot parapet, and how that building is pulled tight to a 0 lot line, which is allowed by current zoning. And so what we see is when we toggle between these images and the other images, although the building is 15 feet higher and undeniably 15 feet higher than the image, the impact of building out to that property line and sort of maxing out the amount of building that's on East Street is far more impactful than our 69-foot 11 building held back. It's not really sort of like a card trick or anything like that. This was done by computer models, and it's all based off of the math, but we really felt that it was important to show that as we worked with the town over the year and a half, the building started to pull itself away from the property line, necessitating that additional story. But we feel like all the moves that we've made, even if they do add cost to the building and, difficult construction measures, et cetera, have all been to bring this down to a residential level and really fit within the environs. So we know that design is very subjective, but we wanted to share this direction and to show, what could have happened if we had really pushed the issue and tried to, volumetrically shove this building up against East Street, as opposed to working with the town to pull those areas back. So with that, thank you very much. And yeah, finally, it's an abbreviated shadow study, and if we need to provide some more infill, we can. But basically, we're showing, 2 times of the year where sun is its most impactful, with morning times and late day times, so that you can see that the shadows are being cast primarily on the rear of the property, the MBTA, and that they circle around to cast some shadows on the adjacent retail plaza, but only at the height of sun in March. So, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation for this evening. Happy to answer any questions about anything we presented tonight, anything that we've submitted. We certainly look forward to Mr. Reardon and his team rolling up their sleeves and digging into the full submittal and the updated plans. We find that to be a very productive, engagement and process, makes for a better project. With that said, we'll turn it over to if anybody has any questions.
So I think it's interesting you ended with this one, and of course, the longest shadows being cast would be in December, not March. But what I know I brought it up last time about the height of the building, and if we look at Liberty and Union West, I believe 59 feet and 65 feet.
Yep.
And those were variances that were given by previous zoning board, not, I wasn't on it, and I think most of the other people were, Bob, maybe were you on it at that time? Yeah. But But the point, my point is that you're coming in with a 69-foot, 11-inch building. I asked about last time, what you can do to reduce it. I also know that the elevator rooms are not part of that calculation, so this is going to be a tall structure, and I hope to be around here for a long time, and when I drive into the center of town, I know I'm going to see a big building.
Sure.
But does it have to be as big as you're making it?
Yeah.
Or is something more reasonable at the higher of the two other buildings?
Well, let me do some back-of-the-envelope math for a second on those other two buildings to figure out how many affordable units each has.
Oh, I don't need a...
Zero and
it's a real easy
zero.
number.
So we have more height because we're providing 25% affordable, which neither of the other projects has. The town is counting 142 units on their subsidized housing inventory, which neither of the other projects have contributed to. So yes, we have a taller building than they do, but we have a premium because of the affordability. Moreover, we reshaped the entire building to meet requests of the engineering department and the fire department. Lastly, we have an agreement with the Board of Selectmen that's premised upon 142 units effectively in this configuration relative to the mitigation payment that we're going to owe the town. So other than a subjective assessment of that this is going to be a tall building, which we agree with, but this is downtown Walpole, by the train, backs up to the tracks. If ever there's a location for height, we believe, respectfully, this is it. And we feel very good. We design a beautiful building. And, I mean, I've as Mr. Reardon knows, and Counselor, I've done a lot of projects where you have 150 people screaming and yelling about the height of the building.
Oh, you got one.
Yeah, so it's not,
Two.
and so, and then I have one final point to make, which I made. Under 40B, height needs to have a quantifiable detriment to the town, other than, wow, this is going to be a tall building, or other than, oh, I'm going to see this as I drive down Main Street. Respectfully, those are subjective assessments about the height of the building. It's not a quantifiable negative impact on anybody in the town.
Oh, I
So-
think it is.
Well,
You think it
on
is?
what basis?
Why do you need 9-foot ceilings in these units? If you reduce them, the building code is 7.6. These are higher than necessary.
Well, respectfully, they're smaller units, and the height of the units is essential, because otherwise, with low ceilings and not as much square footage, it looks much smaller. So the taller...
it looks big.
And moreover, we think that this is the quality of the unit that we want to deliver. We don't want to deliver a unit with 8'4" ceilings, because it has an entirely different feel to the tenant. So the ceiling height that we've proposed, the floor to floor, and the overall building height, we feel fine with, and it's in response to all sorts of other requests that the town has already made. We cannot provide the density that we need to make this project financially feasible and do all of the other things that the town has already requested of us, including the Board of Selectmen, relative to the mitigation payment that they're anticipating. So,
Well, and the only one question, to your point, because it's fair, why can't we get down? It's 65 feet for corporate, right? We're 4 feet, 11 inches high, but why can't we get there? There are certain things on grade and site, but we are only 4 feet different, from my understanding, I believe, on that measurement.
Yeah.
On that basis, we'd argue you're not gonna see the difference in that 4 feet, because it's spread amongst units and from that distance, but it was in large part driven by the request to get the 360 fire department access and to address complaints. The problem is what you suggested is if we came down 7.6, I agree, your math works, right? We're back to 65 feet in line with the project. But
Now,
that's not what the
actually, if
market
you come in at
builds.
7.6, you're way below it.
Okay.
But the point is,
At 8.4, I wouldn't build 8.4 because I would subject to your thing, the market today, or to our architect, nobody is building 8.4. Everybody is building 9. We're building 9.6 in other projects, in other locations. You want, like we want, If we're gonna have a project, we want it successful, we want it to be viable, and we want it to be best in class if we can, both the way we manage it and what we build. In the end, if we could find a way, and we spent a lot of time with Steve, with the parking deck, with looking, could we come in line? We can. But part of that reason is we can't because we made those concessions that drove other benefits for life safety, as Jeff highlighted on 360 access, which is not required under code, and some other things that we think, quite frankly, are in the better interest of overall life safety community basis than whether there are 4 feet, which when you're on grade, I would bet you I could take you to 4 buildings and you couldn't tell me which one was 65 and which was 69. And that's just a friendly bet. I'm
I
not
know.
making it that way. I'm just saying visually, the impact from the street is wildly different. for-
And the purpose of this exhibit, we could build this 55-foot building on top of East Street with no windows, an industrial building, and that's going to be much more impactful to people walking by and the impact.
And
I
you're
mean,
not going to rent it either, so.
no, we would fill it with storage and other things. It wouldn't be an apartment building.
You want to sit here and make threats, I don't think.
No, we're not
that's-
making we're not
Well, you
building
say
that.
you could build that,
I-
right? So-
That's what's allowable under current zoning. So maybe we're not going to build it, somebody else could build that.
It wasn't
Well,
a threat.
it was not, we're not, yeah, it was a theoretical exercise of,
To show something 54 feet could be.
And I'll also tell you, the only reason why I even talk 65 is because I know that you'd be able to go to the Housing Appeals Committee and say, hey, the zoning board gave these other developments 65, and, they want us to hold to, the 55, which is the zoning bylaw. So we're already starting at a higher point. You're coming in saying that you're 1 inch short of going over to a steel structure, right? That's what, so I'm saying that the height of this building is going to be a concern. I've said it at the beginning, I'll say it at this meeting, and when we have the waivers to discuss, I'll bring up that at the waivers. So I think that it's important that, you got a good project. Does it have to be, does it have to be 1 inch short of 70 feet?
we'll look at it again, we certainly will, but we've been very transparent and very candid the whole time, and we've given the town pretty much everything it's asked for. We need the height of this building to make the project financially viable. The town, not to digress into how the HAC works, the town would have to demonstrate why 69 feet is a matter of health and safety. Good luck with that. I mean, it's just not. I mean, quite candidly, and, we're all friends here, it's not, and the town would have no chance winning that argument. So we'll look at it, we will, but in light of everything else we've given to the selectmen, to the fire department, to the engineering department, the way we've structured the building, how the height compared to, I made the argument where if I'm like this to Sean, that's more impactful to him than if I'm like this.
Yeah.
It is. So we're not on East Street, we've set the building back, we've angled it, we think it's visually interesting, the site plan is interesting, we feel very good about it, we'll look at it again, but just to set expectations, it's probably, not gonna change much.
Okay.
All right, so, thank you.
If I could just add just a couple of quick comments. So the actual 69-foot 11, that's not a trigger to a steel structure. That's where we get to the high-rise requirement where you're required to have an additional stair and pressurize your stairs. We're actually allowed to go up to 85 feet out of 3A construction, but obviously we're not getting anywhere near that. Your basic question is does it have to be this high?
Or is it steel reinforced construction?
No.
You can do wood frame up to 85 feet?
You can do wood frame up to 85 feet now, absolutely. But we usually don't go that route for a few different reasons. Just regarding, what has happened to the building, and you said, well, why can't it be, shorter? So the project, however it has arrived at 142 units. That's what ownership needs to provide in order to make it work financially. We've all sat here and we've talked about parking counts, and we need more parking and we need less parking. And I think if you look at the designs, you'll see that there's no more room for parking. So I've been the one that's had to balance this throughout the entire year and a half, where I've had to look at every one of these obstacles that we've come to and said, okay, no one likes it being next to this close to East Street. No one likes it being this close to the train. No one likes it being this close to the retail plaza. The fire department, you know, they were okay with our turnaround, but not our T-turn. Ownership comes out and they pick up another parcel, and all of a sudden I'm on my 4th design of the building, where every time I'm taking those metrics, that parking count, those units, those sizes, and I am reimagining those and re-pushing. And I had to at some point come in and say, well, we need to go another story or this project doesn't happen. And I said, but I've got a couple of things that we can do in order to sort of bring that down. So I promise you, you know, for everything that you've seen, I've run 10, 12 different ways. I've looked at every possible way to do parking. I've looked at one-way, two-way, angled, all of that, you know, compacts. I've looked at every way to get us into this equation. And that's why we come to you today with a project we think that works for everybody. We understand your concerns about the parking, but there are some people that are gonna argue the other side, and we do understand your concerns about the height, but we think we've done everything possible. And just finally, to echo Jeff's point, you know, as far as getting a mass of workforce housing, walkable distance to a TOD train station, this much mass of affordable housing, you know, is there a better place in town than this lot that's adjacent to the, you know, the train tracks, that's adjacent to, you know, the retail plaza? And after we've gone and we've pulled that building in and we've provided that 360 access, you know, this is the building that we bring and we ask you guys to support. So thank you for allowing me to articulate that.
Board members, anybody else have anything? Okay. So, we're looking at peer review with Sean for the next time?
Submitted today.
Just submitted today.
Okay.
So we've dug in, so it includes traffic. You know, really great location, right? So to reiterate the point, I mean, another thing to consider too, when you have density near downtown, it actually helps relieve parking because you got more people visiting the downtown area that aren't taking cars. So in a way, there's some positive return on the issue there. It's not all one way. But we do have some considerable issues with regard to the drainage design and some other things that I think the best thing to do right now is to allow us to sort of work through them with the applicant and their design team, and then see if we can get some of those knocked off before we start burdening you with them. If that's okay with you, then we could get going on that right away.
Yeah, and I do think we're moving along. We might have some disagreements, but
No, listen,
this project's moving along.
I couldn't agree more. This board and this town in general has been great to work with. I mean, listen, this isn't our first rodeo. We don't expect everything to be like, that's awesome, that's awesome, that's awesome, that's awesome, we love it. One procedural question to Mr. Reardon's point, are we authorized, as we review peer review, just to reach out directly rather than through Patrick's office if we have questions or provide?
You're comfortable with that,
We'll
right?
make sure Patrick is copied on everything.
It seems you have done it in the past.
Yeah, we've done it like that in the past.
All right.
Save some brain damage for you guys.
Yeah, and that way, when we have, we'll eventually submit something formal for the record, you know, in response, but it'll just be helpful for, you know, our team to be able to ask questions as they engage. So, yeah, we look forward to getting a copy of that. Other than a couple of, you know, parking-related questions, I like to know what my homework is, and I don't think anything else was requested beyond some of the parking questions, so.
Elevation of
and
the height of the
the height,
building.
yeah, we'll look at that, and then we'll look at Tetra Tech's letter.
Good.
I was going to say, same, and we obviously got the letter today from Sean. It's just a brief skim, very well written, and it's pretty dense. I mean, that might be a goal for the next meeting to have.
Yeah.
Letter given to Sean, maybe some discussion between peer review and.
The two of you guys can talk as far as issues, so when, you know, at our next meeting, it'd be good if we move this move this along.
And frankly, there are a lot of issues that you guys probably are not gonna be that interested in, but they're important to you as an engineer.
Right,
So,
you're talking like drainage stuff and,
sewer slopes, drainage,
Yeah.
foundational design, yeah.
okay. Good. Anything else? Good.
Not-
Anybody
not
from
for
the
them.
public? Okay. So, do we want to continue this until October 11th?
It was either that or September 18th.
Yeah, I think we'll be at more time in September
Yeah.
18th.
October 11th?
October 11th.
October 11th.
Yeah.
So, if that's good with everybody, could I have a motion to continue until October 11th, 7 o'clock, here at Town Hall?
So moved.
Moved by Judy,
Second.
second by Mark. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, so carried. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you all. Really serious.
Yeah, I always get it right, continuing. Here at Town Hall. The only other thing we had on the agenda I saw was minutes. Did we get, we didn't get those minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a procedural question. Can someone point me in the direction, or send me a narrative of what constitutes this friendly 40B? What makes up this friendly 40B?
It's all right.
It's called LIP,
LIP,
Local
okay.
Initiative.
Okay.
It's under the 40B laws.
Laws.
Yep, see ya.
Okay, so on the lip.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, so,
Yeah, by the way, we still go through the whole hearing process.
No, I
don't care
and I
what-
understand
what
that.
agreements they have. We're still looking at public safety and everything that we should be looking at. And it doesn't matter I don't care about the offsite mitigation. That's not what,
right.
that's not what we're
right.
concerned
But
about.
I guess my question is, and I don't know if it's for, maybe George is leaving, but you can answer it.
By George.
For a year and a half, they've sat with town boards or town representatives, and I guess the town representatives are under the assumption that we're just gonna approve everything. Well,
Who gave you that?
no, I'm just asking.
That's not what
because
happens.
when we get to the 69-foot 11 building, why was that, I guess, continued to be allowed when 55, maybe 65 for the other buildings were allowed by other boards? I guess I'm not clear
But
on
it's all
that.
outlined in 40B and what a LIP is.
Okay.
No, so, just to kind of clarify, so when you,
Continue discussion of this matter while the
Yeah.
hearing's been
You're right.
continued, so I think we should postpone.
I-
further
No, I mean,
think she
it's
had-
just, I just
that
want to
was
know
a
where I
procedural-
can
was a
find out
procedural
about it. I
question,
didn't
but,
want to ask
talking
about them. It's not about them, it's about a lip and,
Well, you did start talking about this specific project at the height
no,
of
I
the
don't mean
building.
the height, okay.
Okay, so, it's been a long night. Somebody want to make a motion to adjourn?
Sorry,
Oh,
I can obviously cannot do
Yeah.
that, but just one thing, the October 11th meeting is going to be in place of the October 4th meeting. Does that make sense? So it'll be.
Town meeting.
Right. It'll be swapped.
So what does that mean?
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. So the next meeting is September 18th, and then followed by that would be October 11th, and then November 1st.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? Tim? It makes a motion to adjourn. Somebody want a second? Second by Drew. All those in favor? Aye. Hey, good night, everybody. Thank you, Patrick.